Howdy, howdy. Welcome back to my tiny corner of the internet. So I wonder how you guys are doing. What did you guys think of the last stream with myself and Undead Chronic? I enjoyed the discussion that we had. I think we had a good discussion. We talked about a couple of things that we both, enjoyed. So I felt like the discussion was overall very positive, very good discussion over different aspects of life, especially the issues that, young men are going through regards to the current cost of living crisis. We even talked about how there are new content creators kind of popping up because of the newer issues. I enjoyed the stream. I loved having the conversation with him. I used to watch his content back in the day. I remember the OG red pill stuff. I remember watching that a lot of people got really disenchanted by the way feminism was behaving, like way back when in the day. And he was one of the few content creators that really kind of talked about these things. I kind of pointed these things out. But how's your guys' work day going? How's your work week going? I hope you enjoyed the last stream, so how's the work week going? We haven't really been doing a lot of Wage Rage Radio. I do want to keep doing Wage Rage Radio. I'll probably start one in the future, get a stage going. But, chill and chat is definitely something I'd love to do more of. Do you think you're going to, do you think, are going to crash due to the Iran war? I don't think. I think it'll be like Mad Max, like said, though. I think, unironically, when it comes to, the way the United States is going, I don't really see a very bright outcome for the United States just because of how stupid it is. They care more about, the propaganda that they spew. It's like that one idiot that I posted in the community section. So it's basically like, Alistair is a paid propagandist or something, whatever, right? Even though, like, literally the entire thesis of this channel is to be anti-propaganda, to actually respect technical and real skill, things that contribute to civilization, right? That's the propaganda talking point of my channel. But somehow, like the typical idiot in the United States, they're more focused on, like, propaganda wars than actually building a country that's actually worthwhile in anything, So I don't really see a particularly bright future with the United States. And so, like, if you could just check out a civilization, check out a society, that just might be the brightest thing that you could possibly do. So I found out when I was playing Hytale a little while ago, is that the higher ingots, are not actually found in the lava level. It's actually found in the, what's it called? The other biomes, the ice and so on biomes. Hey guys, watch this. Alistair only read 1/3 of the words I write here. I read your whole comment, man. I don't know about reading 1/3 of your comment. Dude, I try to read everybody's comment. Obviously I don't read it all out loud, right? I kind of just get the gist of it. Maybe I should read it all out loud. You gotta understand, I'm a little bit retarded, Eagle Cash. So, you gotta understand that one. I'm not the smartest tool, or not the sharpest tool in the shed, So it's kind of interesting, right? I've been talking about a little while on my channel about the HRification of civilization. Yeah, almost got it. Okay, you can call me out on that one. Yeah, maybe I am a bit retarded. Okay, you're right to call me out on that one. But you want to talk about the HRification of society. So get this. So I get pulled in. You know how, it's funny because I talk a lot about on this channel, even my older videos. Your reading style. It is kind of funny. I probably should listen to my own streams to kind of see how I sound in that regard, right? So, fun fact, I've talked about it countless times, how I've got, like, a pretty long-ass commute to work, and that's why I, like, even with the interview with Undead Chronic last night, this thing literally just crashed as soon as I do it. I love it when this game crashes, man. You're trying to have a chill night, and then, a game decides to, like, totally, like, crash out on you and just, completely, screw itself over. But, that's okay. So I was, I've already talked about on this channel for quite some time that, that I have like a pretty significant commute. I'm just going to create a new world. We're just going to call it New World 1 or something like that. Right? I have a pretty significant commute to work, and so that impacts, you get up pretty early. You have to get home pretty late, whatever, right? I get home pretty late. And I was talking with that a little bit with Undead Chronic last night, why we kind of push it out so late. Hytale, man, is that, the commute's a pretty bit significant. And the funny part, what's up, Monarchist Orc, right? It's because I was talking with my employer about this. It's because originally I had hybrid firms or whatever to actually, work at. And that was the original negotiation with that sort of stuff. And eventually, me and my wife ended up buying a house. I've already said countless times. It's kind of funny with that J889 guy was basically saying, like, what will your fans think about you when they find out you have a house? Well, yeah, I do have a house. Me and my wife bought one is because we both dual income. And that's literally the only thing that allows you to buy a house in today's economy. And, so we bought a house stupidly under the assumptions that, like, there were static work conditions that were going on. They yoinked those permissions. The HRification of society. They yoinked those permissions and told, basically knowing that I bought a house pretty far out. Only to basically, go full on site after they had like hybrid work firms for the longest time, right? So I've been having to deal with like a really long ass commute. If you want to know what like most of my wage rate is quite literally about, it is literally the fact is that most of my occupying time is not just at the workplace, that just tends to fucking suck. Because it doesn't even, like, all the privileges that tech jobs used to have just don't exist anymore. But, mostly because the fact is the lengthy-ass commute time. Like, this is mostly what this, game is not being shown? Here, let me go ahead and change it up for you so I can actually get that fixed up for you. Because I actually did start a new instance. So, most of the wage rage that I talk about on this channel is really just in regards to the fact is that, like, the commute. Like, the fact is it's so stupidly dang long just to show up to a place you don't even want to get to be in the first place, right? While gas prices are skyrocketing, right? So like a whole bunch of stressors. And I try to communicate this with my workplace, being like, how is it the HR department is allowed to, be on remote work firms, but you won't even let any of the engineers be on remote work firms because there's no really reason to that, right? I talked to one of my coworkers, they're like, well, HR doesn't need remote work firms or some stuff like that, or because the quality of engineering has gone down, right? And it's a lot of these copes that they kind of come up with. But more importantly, I try to negotiate with them and say, hey, you know what? This commute's getting a bit tough. It's a little bit hard is because 5 months after buying a house, you decided to yank like remote work firms and do a full RTO, return to the office, which is, also simultaneously when gas prices were skyrocketing to 450. It's like, this is getting a bit tough to do. It's like, if you want to know where most of my wage rage in this channel is coming from, it's literally just because of that dynamic. So, funny enough, I said, hey, this is going to affect my productivity. I'm not going to think as clearly, is because the fact is, it's like, it's kind of hard when you spend a lot of, literally, when you get home from work, you have maybe 3 hours of free time, just kind of downtime, right? HR is above the normal workers. I learned that the hard way, because this is what this stream is about. I get summoned into a performance discussion and put on a pit plan. Yeah, surprising, shocking, right? I get pulled on a pit plan, even though for months I said, that this is becoming logistically infeasible to show up this place in the first place with skyrocketing gas prices, RTO, all because of Operation Pedo Fury, all because the rich pedophiles wanted to start a war with Iran to distract us from the Epstein files, right? We all know why they're doing this stupid war. They're trying to cover up the Epstein files. They're trying to cover up for their rich pedophile buddies. But, the corporations decide, we're going to take this as an opportunity to go full RTO. Obviously that doesn't apply to the HR roles. That doesn't apply to the HR people for some reason, is because the funny part is when I get pulled in this performance discussion, right? It's talking about a lack of performance, even though I've said for months that, this is becoming logistically infeasible just because of the commute time alone, just to come in to, this office, right? None of that really mattered to talk about performance discussions. And all they did was, of course, give you the obstinate, cold-hearted take, like, well, that was your decision that you and your wife wanted to get a slice of the American dream. What's up, Peepsy? You and your wife just wanted to get a slice of the American dream, settle down, have a house, and then, settle down, maybe have a family, right? We can't have that. It doesn't matter if that was supposed to be, like, the one way you could have actually afforded, like, the American dream. It doesn't matter because that was your choice. You're just gonna have to deal with the consequences. It doesn't really matter. The fact is that, like, it's literally no loss of them to do this arrangement. They were completely cold-hearted and obstinate to this, right? Even though it's been a significant drain on health, all that sorts of stuff. And I'm just kind of sitting there, it's like, and then the funny part is, during this stupid performance discussion, where was the HR lady? She wasn't there. She was remote working into the discussion. How funny is that? Me, an engineer, just coming in here being like, it's kind of ironic that they're telling us they're not going to do remote work. The HR person is saying, we're not doing remote work to the engineer while they're remote working. What's up, Gamma, dude? It's been a fun day, dude. I love HR. They're like my favorite department, dude. They're totally not like the epitome of the rent-seeking classes who run our country. They're totally not, the epitome of the rich pedophiles who run our country. But you gotta love it, because they're essentially the enforcers of the bourgeois class. And yeah, of course, the J889 is going to be like, well, you're a propagandist for saying this. I'm just pointing out the fact that they're just the thugs and the enforcers of the wealthy. That's all they are at the end of the day. But, I get in there and I said, obviously, let's be honest here. If you get put on a pit plan, what does that mean? It means they're probably going to can you. They're probably going to get rid of you. That's essentially what it means. They're essentially trying to push you out. And so that's when I kind of realized it's like, the thing is that, like, I've had some issues with this company for quite some time now. And that's why I kind of put out an announcement, because I'm going to be looking for another job, is because it's quite insane. The fact is that, like, the tech job market has gotten so bad that, like, even somebody who has, you know, an engineering degree, you know, can't even get an okay job. Like, all the privileges that used to come with, like, a tech job just don't exist anymore. It's completely offshore. They offshored everything. And they don't even hide that fact. They celebrate that fact. It's like in the last video. It's like they're mocking the younger generations on one of the few safe careers that could afford a house. And in my case, it didn't. It's because my income alone does not afford the average house in the area. They'll gaslight you about it that it does, but they'll never acknowledge that, right? So I brought up the concerns to HR. It's like, you know, the cost of gas is skyrocketing. It's like, can you, you know, at least help me, you know, sell my house so I can relocate? And I'll downsize. I told them, I was like, I'll downsize to a 2-bed, 2-bath so me and my wife can downsize. But, like, we need some help here, is because the fact is this is unsustainable. And to yoink remote work firms to do a full RTO while gas is skyrocketing, you know, is a bit harsh, is because the fact is we can't manage the logistics. And, of course, it's the same HR cold-hearted obstinance that they have towards the workers, because, again, they're essentially just the enforcer class for the ruling class. And, you know, that's when I kind of realized it's like, you know, this company fucking sucks. It's like, you know, you wanted to just quietly retire and just kind of have a stable job just to show up to earn an honest income. But I'm going to be honest, could you really do that these days? No, not really. But, you know, essentially, it's like you wanted to play the game. You wanted to follow by the rules. You tried to do everything. You stayed away from drugs. You worked hard. You worked honestly. And then you get smacked across the face and told that, like, you know, we're going to keep, you know, renegotiating the terms and conditions, making them worse and worse as time goes on. And so, essentially, this is how we've gotten into the position that we're in. Mr. Alistair, we will look into that. Oh, essentially, it's the same. Who is that J809 guy from the Post? Oh, he's probably just some dipshit fed gaslighter. He's like, he thinks he has a little gotcha when I said, yeah, you know, me and my wife own a home, but I, you know, it's clearly stated that the only reason we have a home is because we both work. We both contribute to the household finances. You know, they always miss out that part. They never talk about that part. It's kind of amazing how they conveniently miss that aspect, you know. But, you know, it's been a fun day, because, what's up, man? Sweet, finally caught one live. Yeah, dude, the reason I stream so late is because I have so little free time, is that when I get home, it's like I have 3 hours of free time to actually do things. You know, hopefully that's not forever, because I'm currently trying to change jobs. You know, I'm hoping to get the fuck out of this one. I'm doing all right, man. I'm trying to get out of this job is because it's complete ass. It's like, you know, here's the problem. Okay, me and my wife bought a house. Okay, this is how, you know, cold-hearted and obstinate, like, these people were. I said, you know, there were some problems going on with my wife's jobs there, you know, where she might lose her job or something like that. And so the fact is, it's like, you know, we would really be balls to the walls, you know, thin on money, if she had lost her job, you know, a couple of months ago. Completely cold-hearted and obstinate. It's like I wouldn't have been able to afford the house on my income alone, because I'm just not paid enough to actually afford that. And so, but they didn't care. They literally don't care. I'm going through a wage rage moment, so I hope you guys don't mind. I'm just going full wage rage here. I'm the only one working in my house, and I'm not 24. Not enough, lol. Yeah, that's the thing. We're all screwed. But the absolute same thing. If you had told me 10 years ago that, you know, the average engineering salary, you know, would not even be able to afford a home. And on top of that, the work conditions would have been so much worse, where they're just, you know, they just have, like, no bargaining power. It's like, you know, it would have shocked me. I would have never believed you. I like the discussion with Undead Chronic. Way more productive than the last ones. Yeah, City Cucker was annoying and retarded, dude. You know, that... Yeah, what's up, Marissa? Add some green hats in the chat. Let's get some green hats in the chat. Yeah, the discussion with City Cucker, it's funny, is because the fact is they're a little group, and I found the little messages when they first reached out to me to do an interview, and I wasn't ignoring them, per se, right? Because I didn't know who they were. You know, they're like, you know, we're a progressive MRA group. We want to do an interview. And I was like, okay, you know what? We'll talk about this. Because, like, you know, I talk a lot about men's issues. I talk about the cost of living crisis, how young men are getting disenfranchised, that I figured that the discussion, you know, would have been a little bit, you know, better, you know, than what they had basically, you know, talked about, right? You know, but that's not how it panned out. These people just wanted to be like a propaganda vector. They wanted to lecture to my entire audience about these things and not actually, like, have a substantive discussion. They were just trying to basically lecture to you guys. They didn't want to actually have a discussion on anything, which is the tragic part on their losses, because they're just too retarded to see that. But, you know, it is what it is. Let's go down here and get some copper. That'd be nice. So I found out the thorium, you know, I tell you how many times countlessly people talk about how they've been laid off their job, but I try to, like, help people out here and there, you know, kind of pay it forward if people need help. Not a live time. Why isn't the commute compensated? I know, I agree. I wish, the thing is like, now that traffic's so much worse nowadays, you know, they canceled the night economy. Everybody has to work 9 to 5. You know, why isn't the commute where you spend, like, I spend 2 hours a day commuting, you know, into and out of work. Why isn't that compensated? I've never understood that. Because the thing is that, like, you know, you're essentially spending time going to a place you don't even want to be at in the first place. So, like, why isn't it a part of the, why isn't it a part of your pay? Because the thing is, it's part of the actual, like, logistics to actually show up to work in the first place. But they never talk about that. They love to pass infinite cost to the working class. They always do. Pulls the crime didn't help too. They're forcing people to commute still because the commercial real estate market is on the brink of collapse. Yeah, that's the real reason. That's the reason why they hate remote work. See, this is what I was talking about in the previous stream. The reason they want you to go back into the office is because the fact is they want to keep their real estate properties high. Because when they keep their real estate properties high, the neighboring, you know, rent houses that they need you, the wage pods that they need for you to show up out of the first place, right? You know, if those depreciate, those rents will go down. So they need you paying top premium prices just to show up to work in the first place. And the best part of that entire arrangement is they will call it the global 1% privilege the entire time. You're a part of the global 1% is because you have to pay that additional amount of rent just to show up to work in the first place. Amazing stuff, isn't it? Okay, I need to get myself plant fiber. And we can get some of that stuff. Shut it down. Most automated civilization in history. Isn't with all this technology supposed to be making people's lives easier? Like, you know, I'm an engineer. I went into engineering just because I like to build things and I want to see a bright and shining future and a better world where people's lives get better. But it's amazing to me that we have all this technology and funny enough, life isn't getting better. It's getting harder. People are working harder. Civilization is getting harder to deal with. And there's no compromise on any of this stuff. You know, they just quite literally, you know, they will mock and deride you if you try and point it out. So, yeah. Fun stuff. You pay, not the company. Yeah, they love passing the cost towards that. Well, I built high power lasers. I built a couple of game engines and stuff like that. I tinker around with a whole bunch of different things. I might actually broadcast it and showcase it on my channels. Because, like, if I'm going to be out of a job, guys, you know, because of this little PIP or whatever, performance improvement plan, where they're just trying to, you know, find a little pretext to lay you off, right? The reason I think they're just trying to lay me off, I have gold for you on the Hightail server. Okay, hey Caffeine, is it okay if I go on your server to join you? Is it okay if I string that? I didn't want to join your server, and then like you know, basically put people's names on that stuff. I just didn't want to do that. You know, is it okay if I just join the server? I don't know. We can always do it next stream or something like that, Caffeine. So, you know, they're doing the whole like PIP stuff. So it is what it is. You know, the economy's brutal. It's terrible. You know, the thing that I've learned running this channel, it's fine at you. All right, man. One thing I've learned about running this channel, running Wage Rage Radio and talking about these things. Yeah, high-powered lasers, man. Go watch one of my earlier videos. Yeah, dude, if you like that, it's fun stuff. It's fun to build things. And the funny part is, like, tech used to actually have, like, really solid jobs with solid perks. But the thing is that, you know, they got the bright idea, you know, we're not going to even do that. We're just going to basically offshore that all and just, like, you know, nerf all the things and just, you know, do infinite offshore. And that's essentially where we're at. But the craziest part about that is that it used to be a dignified and respected field. And I don't think engineering is respected as it used to be. It's like, I've seen it, like, even in my last video, I talked about it. It's like, you know, they're celebrating, like, the collapse of, like, these jobs or roles. Now, granted, Meta's a fucking shitty company to work for. I hate Meta personally, but I would never take it out on the employees. Like, that's just stupid. Like, Meta's obviously a god-awful corporation. Uber Plasma is not ideal. You shouldn't really be a main job. No, that's the thing. I know people, Al, that who are living off Uber and plasma donations. It's brutal, you know, in the event of losing your jobs. Luckily, you know, the thing is, you know, having some savings does help you get by, but it is amazing how, you know, like, what used to be a prestigious job just isn't a prestigious job. You complain to the HR about working conditions. I think they will try to. We do not require service. That's the thing. That's the route I think that they're going, Cataclysm, right? You know, quite literally, they're like, you know what? All right, we're going to can his asses because the fact is, it doesn't matter if the RTO policy is fucking stupid. It doesn't matter if it's, like, you know, actually detrimental. Because, you know, it doesn't matter if any of these things, you know, matter. Because the thing is, what they're going to do is just, you know, they're going to die on that hill, you know, to preserve their profits or some nonsense. That was such a cop-out. That was a flop. That was a brain fart. I'm not gonna lie. Whatever I was trying to elaborate there just, you know, didn't come out right. I'm gonna be honest. I deserve to be called retarded for that one. But, you know, it doesn't matter if they want to do the RTO stuff, and it doesn't actually have any negative impact on them whatsoever. They're willing to die on that hill just to make the wagey suffer so they can squeeze a couple extra pennies. You know, it's not about efficiency. It's about power and control. Oh, this guy's an asshole. I need to get a sword. Yep, it's all just about power and control at the end of the day. And so, you know, the funny part is the HR department doesn't have to show up, didn't have to show up to the little performance review because they're full-time remote working. Yeah, it's so tragic that engineering is such a disrespected field these days. I mean, the United States is going to pay for it in the long run. And it's kind of funny is because that J89 guy was saying like, oh, you glaze China too much. It's like, I'm just looking at the technologies that they're making, man. You know, they respect engineering in that country. They don't respect engineering here. So yeah, the rat's an op. But you know, the thing is that it's a respected profession there, much more than it is here. You know, like look at the difference. Like which ones have remote work firms? The HR department, not the engineering roles. So the proof is in the pudding on which one they prefer. Let's go and get some more. Let's go kill that rat. Honestly, I think I've been degree hacking with WGU. I don't even know which degree to go to. I don't think there is a good degree anymore. So basically, what I think is going on, here's a hypothesis for you guys. What's going on in the United States and why it's so stupidly hollowing itself out is because the fact is it's like civilizationally, boomers going, fuck you, got mine, right? They don't care if they're destroying the nation. They don't care if they're destroying the country because fuck you, they've got their really high property values. They don't care about the younger generations. They got their fully paid off properties, and they're okay with literally the country collapsing because after them, it's like the country existing after them. It's just like it's inconceivable to them, right? So that's what I think. It's like generationally, like civilizationally, boomers are doing a collective fuck you got mine. They don't care if they're destroying all of civilization because they've got theirs, and they don't care if everything else tanks. It's a wild hypothesis, but I think that's what it's coming down to. Oh, I'm surprised I didn't have enough stone for that. We're gonna need that to basically melt copper. China has vitality, life, vibrancy. America's deindustrialized. Tore down our cities for outless trips. Yeah, it's essentially... That's... The thing is, and if you point that out, they'll call you a foreign propagandist. You're just a simp for China. Even if you point that out, that they're, you know, advancing technologically, making leaps and bounds. It's like, here's the thing, okay? I was watching, I think it was like Marissa in China or whatever. She's a YouTuber. She lives in China or whatever, right? And she, you know, she was going through, like, how much does it cost to live in China? Okay, like, you know, you've heard the third world is, like, talking point that's, like, much more cheaper in the third world, so you can live like a king in the third world. That's partially true, right? So if you were to live in, like, India or China, right, and work a local job for the local currency, you know, it would take, like, a full year's worth of salary to afford an NVIDIA GPU. And so that's the point of privilege that they're always talking about when they're making the third world is talking point. So... When they're basically, you know, saying that is the case for that side of the world, you know, there's a partial kernel of truth in that one. But the thing is, their cost of living when it comes to the necessities of life, such as housing, is significantly lower. Okay, the problem is that here in the United States is that we've sacrificed a decent standard of living. See, American dollars can actually go pretty far. But the problem is that because it's being eaten up by rent-seeking parasitism, it doesn't feel like it's going very far. I'll join. Give me a sec. Hey, man, hope you do. Are you all right? Do you think 107 is IQ enough to be an engineer? I'm going to be honest with you. There's not really any IQ threshold to be an engineer, okay? You want to know how to be an engineer, and I'm going to be honest to God with you, it doesn't have so much to do with IQ. I know, even though I call myself an elitist, it has to do with, are you willing to sink enough of your time into no-lifing something to understanding it? If you can do that, then you're good enough to be an engineer. You could go be a computer science guy if you really wanted to. It's not necessarily... Here's one thing you'll notice about any profession or trade or skill or whatever, right? You know, if you're willing to sink a fair amount of time and effort into it, you can master really anything. It's not really an IQ threshold. In Brazil, some companies' HRs can't get low wages and blame things like EBT or laziness paying more. Possibly. Would you summarize the opinion of liberal democracy? Well, here's the thing. The reason I think it's a civilizational fuck you got mine is because the fact is, even if, like, you know, you could preserve, you know, American civilization by just quite literally making housing affordable, they won't do that is because an entire generation of people have gotten theirs, so fuck you got mine. Electrical. I'm trying to get into, like, a power company, to be honest, because unironically, I'd love to work power engineering at this point. It's like anything related to software is just so toast these days. It's like, it's completely cooked. It's like, see, the problem is it's not whether or not AI is going to replace software. It's whether or not your manager thinks AI is going to replace software. Because if they think AI is going to replace software, then they're going to offshore your jobs. We're doing it past before. So. Yeah. Let's put this here. So is 85 enough IQ? I'm gonna be honest. If you start getting to the really low IQ territories where you're actually brain dead, of course you're gonna have. You're probably not gonna cut it out. There's not very many jobs when you get beneath that. So, just fun fact. It's like there's a point where there is a threshold to these things. So you obviously, if you have like a bullet through your head, you're probably gonna have a tough time understanding things. Maybe not always, but the thing is that if you have. The problem is that, like, if you have a normal functioning brain, you're 100 IQ or something like that, you're just an average person, you probably could do engineering. It might be a little bit extra effort or whatever, but the thing is that, like, if you have, like, significant brain damage, like, sure, yeah, realistically, you're gonna have a tough time really in any kind of intellectual task, to be fair. It's no insult to anybody. How did you end up working on game engines? I just quite literally started working on it because it was just something I found an interest in high-performance mathematics, and so that's the reason why I got into, like, game engine programming for simulations. It wasn't even so much game engines. I just said that for doing physics simulations, because that was my favorite thing. So, 84, and you all have trouble sweeping the floor. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, at one point or another, it's like, when you get to a low enough IQ, you're just functionally, like, you're brain damaged. It's like, it's no insult to anybody. It's just things you're not very useful to civilization, like, whatsoever. So, copper ingots. Isn't 80 where you can't tie your own shoes? Possibly. How do you cope with the reality that you're capable of a lot but limited by external forces? Barely. I don't cope with it. It's kind of like that. I hate fucking Marvel or whatever. It's like that one guy, the Hulk, when he was basically like, how do you cope with your anger? It's like, I don't. It's similar to that. It's like, because the thing is that, like, I would love to do a lot of things, but because of the cost of living crisis, it's like, it's funny because the United States always touted itself as like being a center of innovation, hub of innovation and innovators. But the thing is that nobody can afford to actually tinker or build anything, is because nobody can afford their garages in the first place. And the people who barely afford them are paying extortionate amounts of money just to live in them. And that's my case. I wanted a shot at the American dream just to kind of be left the fuck alone, be a tinker in his garage and be left alone. Yet here we are. Here I am, streaming on YouTube, bitching and complaining about the wage life on the internet. So, but I don't really have a cope for it. I guess this is my cope, Iggy. I guess this is my cope. Chatting with people on the internet is my cope to the fact that I'm limited by external forces to pursue my dreams and passions in life. So, it is what it is. The thing is that what kind of like calmed me down a little bit, from wage raging was recognizing how many other people are in a similar situation to myself and realizing like, we're all in this together, The commute, fuck the commute. The interesting thing about the commute is that, like, unironically, in my case, like, my main mistake was quite literally thinking that I was gonna finally have a shot at the American dream to own my own home, settle down with my wife, and have an okay life, and just be a tinker in his garage. It was my mistake in thinking that, because, I probably bit off more than I can chew, and so the fact is it's had consequences in my productivity, and so, and my company's not willing to budge on that. Even the fact is it costs them literally nothing to just do, even hybrid work. It is what it is. So, this company's been asked. I'm leaving it. It is what it is. So, but that's the thing. It's like now they're just trying to do the PIP layoff nonsense. And I called them out on that. I documented that stuff. It's because they think, I don't document these things. But I very much do document it. I drive 2 hours to 4 hours, 6 days a week during tax season. Yeah. Dude, you have it so much worse than me. I'm here, I am bitching about 1 hour one way and then 2 hours like a day or something like that, right? But I've known people, would you take a 20K pay cut to work remotely? Actually, yes, I would take a 20K pay cut to work remotely. Absolutely. But, the thing is like the stories that you guys have told me on the similar situations, and I've heard some horrible stories from people. It's like, of how bad that they have it. It's like, everyone has their own unique story of how they're uniquely getting fucked over in this cost of living crisis. And that's kind of one thing that I realized is that I wasn't really particularly alone. And that's also was a big relaxer to me and my wife, is because, like, we began to talk about it, realizing it's like, you know what? We're kind of all in this boat together, kind of getting through it, like, piece by piece. I don't think the ability to tie your shoes is always related to IQ. Possibly. The only good thing about all this crap I've been complaining about in wage slavery for years, told constantly I was entitled. They tell us all that, man. I got told that. I said, this is logistically becoming infeasible just to show up and work because of skyrocketing gas prices. And on top of that, you're not willing to budge on you're not willing to budge on the RTO stuff. And so, it is getting pretty terrible. And it's funny that they'll call you entitled about that, even though you're just saying, like, you know, hey, there's literally no loss to you by just doing this. They don't care. And that's the thing. It's like, when you begin to realize, like, every time they tell somebody entitled, like, well, actually, you're just the loose bolt. You're just individually the problem, you know, going against the corporate family. You're just the, you know, the over-socialized talking point that every HR department gives you. It's like, you're the oddball out. You're just not a team player, yada, 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 right? You know, it's funny how they say that to so many people. And it turns out it's like they've been saying that to everybody. It's like somebody, he's like fucking every woman around the corner, and he's just telling all like, well, you're the special one to me, but he's fucking all the women. That's what employers are doing to us by telling us that we're entitled, that we want too much, that we're demanding too much, and that we're just not a team player. Employers are basically the jackass that's fucking 20 different women and then telling us that we're special, but in the reverse, talking down to us. IQ does matter, Cope. I'm not going to argue on the IQ thing. It obviously does matter to some degree. It can also depend on the IQ taste. Raven's progressive matrices online. So, yeah. How the fuck do you end up in that position? I had a 240-mile commute a while. It was not fun, but I'm glad. Dude, I'm trying to change. I would take a pay cut for a more remote work, more remote work opportunity, or that being able to sell a house and just finally move to closer to an actual job site. The problem is, like, the commute's ass, and I'd rather just kind of like, I would be okay with a pay cut for a remote job, but you know, it is what it is. Good way to estimate IQ without taking a test. Here's the problem with IQ as like a consistent measurement, is because with IQ, you know, a lot of the times when we talk about IQ test is like, you know, when you measure somebody's IQ, if you take somebody's IQ, it's not a reproducible thing. Like, it will go up the more somebody takes an IQ test. And that begs the question, is IQ truly static? I don't know. I wish I had an answer to that one. So, a good way to, yeah, we're entitled, but they also say that we should be ambitious. Dude, I was ambitious. 10 years ago, I was really ambitious. You know, I considered, you know, building things a passion. It is a passion for me. I love doing it. The thing is that, like, there has to be some level of reward, or eventually you get burnt out. And I got burnt out years ago. You know, now I'm more cautious about the, you know, necessarily putting myself or chasing my dreams or passions, because I got burnt by that stuff. You know, honestly, going to get my Mexican citizenship because my dad is because I just plan to escape and just, dude, honestly, the United States is a dying country. I'm going to tell everybody right now, if you want to leave the country, 100% more power to you. This is going to be the graveyard of the boomer, because this is all this country is at the end of the day. Everything here, and like, it's like Undead Chronic said, you know, a little while ago. It's like everything in this country is designed to be hospice care for the eternal boomer. This is supposed to be the tomb of the boomer, and they're going to take down the entire country for the boomer, you know, all the way to the grave. They don't care if they're taking everything down. They don't care if they're taking a country down. They don't care about future generations, because fuck you, they got theirs. Okay? This is, I know, Gamma, I'll join in a bit. You know, this is just the graveyard of the boomer. This is, you know, they don't want anybody else wanting to come in. They don't want anybody else coming into their side of civilization. They want this to be the graveyard of the boomer, and nobody else is allowed. And, you know, anybody else's convenience or, you know, civilizational matters is not a matter to them whatsoever. Knew plenty of genius types who crashed out and burned because they thought they could game the system, or that certain work was beneath them. See, you can't ever be that mentality, okay? You can't beat the system in the sort of sense. And the point is, the funny part is, I've talked about this on this channel. It's like, you're not going to beat the system, okay? You know, if you try to beat the system, you know, in this case, you know, you try to go against the existing powers that be, you're just going to either end up in jail or death, okay? That's a fact of life, okay? So the best thing you can do is just check out of civilization and let the empire crumble on its own. It's not going anywhere, you know? So, you know, when somebody is doing stupid stuff, let them have their way. So, and then on top of that, the work beneath them. Like, you can't have that mentality in any work. You know, the funny part is, back when I worked minimum wage jobs, it's like, you know, it's like any work is work at the end of the day. You know, but the thing is back in the day, like, work actually meant something where you could afford a place to live, and that was a plus. But, you know, not anymore. That is not the case anymore. Now, boomers, you know, seem to be under the impression, the existing American empire seems to be under the impression that you're supposed to have the same work ethic of enfranchisement, just without actually being enfranchised. So it's like when companies say, you know, you should treat this place as you own it, but then they don't actually want you to own it. They want to take all the credit for it, and then they just want to pass all the responsibilities to you. It's the same shit, different day. So, I think new bricks and minifig system. Oh yeah, the bricks and minifig system, you want to talk about peak lawfare? Like, you know, what was happening with Reckless Ben is a perfect example of, like, the litigious slave state and the lawfare that people, like, these people will engage in if they can. It's quite impressive, like, what they do. IQ is possibly just capacity. It doesn't define you. It just is a metric. I agree. For my new home state, check out the Chevyville, Indiana mayor said that voters questioning a new data center going up in the area. The funny part is that with the whole data centers, they're trying to do it to be competitive with China. It's not going to work. They pissed off too many people for the data center thing to ever be a thing. Like, even if I were to go total, like, pro AI, even though I use AI myself, it's like, you know, it wouldn't stop the fact that they pissed off everybody using AI to antagonize the shit out of them. How many times have they talked about pushing people into the permanent underclass, you know, and they're surprised why people hate AI? Because they don't talk about the tangible benefits of how it's going to benefit civilization. Maybe they do, and it doesn't get broadcast, but I see more talking points about a permanent underclass rather than actually how this technology benefits humankind. I've already given my case why I think it'll be a good thing. It's just it goes down to implementation. You know, watch this. Like, what's going to happen? Okay, you know, the great American working class crash out. It's going to be French Revolution style. Here's what's going to happen, okay? You know, there's going to be a working class crash out. There's going to be a revolution. And then, like, after the revolution, there's going to be some jackass 100 years in the future being like, you know, those evil American revolutionaries that killed the rich pedophiles. You know, they were building a utopia with AI. It's like, how did they not see that this was all going to benefit them? They're going to rewrite the history books to say, like, you know, this was actually beneficial or something. They rewrite the history books all the time. I wouldn't care about data centers if it weren't for the pollution. Yeah, again, you know, the funny part is, like, data centers can be 100% clean. It's just the thing is, once again, like, the data centers that they're propping up, unironically, you know, there's a way to actually have clean data centers. Data centers aren't necessarily new. You know, there's ways to actually, you know, deal with the heating problem and also deal with the power and also deal with the cooling. All these things are very well-defined engineering problems. You know, I could, you know, pull out like a class, like, unironically, if you want to know what it takes to actually do, like, you know, thermodynamics relevant to, like, heating and cooling, like, I can literally just show you a couple, like, you know, it's just heat capacity shit. That's all you really need. It's not like you really have any more additional variables on that. That's all well, like, you know, solved stuff. That's well-defined stuff. The power stuff, even that's well-defined, is because we've had nuclear fission power. They just don't want to do it. You know, so, but they're not going to do it intelligently. They never do. But they will sure as shit act like they're going to do it, and then they'll pay the propagandists to fluff up AI more than it is actually, like, you know, implementing it properly where it doesn't piss everybody off. That's the peak of American ingenuity, is hiring propagandists to say that AI is great, and then cheaping out on everything else. Noise pollution, yeah, that's another one. That's probably one of the things that's not very easily fixed, but, you know, it is what it is. I'm reminded of a 10-year articles defending 10-year-old articles defending Weimar. People always defend shit in retrospect, you know. It's like, you know, when, like, I don't necessarily think that, like, there isn't going to be, like, a working class revolution in this country. It's practically inevitable at this point. They're going to write articles being like, where did it go so wrong? You know, they were literally 10 years away from a utopia because they were creating, like, a great machine, you know, or AI data center or something. That's how they're going to write the history books, like, when the United States eventually, like, collapsed in on itself. You'll be like, I just don't know what went wrong. It was like it was a world empire. Maybe it has something to do with the rich pedophiles controlling everything and then just, you know, engaging in endless rent seeking. No clue. Yeah, they're going to monopolize it. They're going to engage in more rent seeking. You know, the funny part is that if everybody's rent seeking in civilization, then everything's artificially inflated, and that's essentially how you get into the existing situation the United States is in. If everybody's rent seeking and everything's artificially inflated. See, that was the funniest thing I laughed about when I talked about, like, my AI video, okay? You know, here's a fun fact. You remember when Sam Altman was going on talking about, you know, how AI is going to be cheaper than, like, raising a human being, you know, from, like, start to birth all the way to finish, right? You know, even though, like, objectively, if you do it in terms of raw energy, it's actually, like, the human brain only takes 20 watts of power, you know, in comparison to the tremendous amounts of energy that's being expended onto, you know, the data center. So why is that? What's the conundrum? Why is it only takes 20 watts of power to power a human being, but yet it's so expensive to be a human being in the first place? Well, let's look at your rent that's driving up your need for actually living, because the fact is there's some rich pedophile running an apartment complex, you know, thing. Oh, is something going on, guys? Uh-oh. I'm gonna go ahead and listen to my own stream. Uh-oh. Something going on, guys. Yeah, I don't know. So the thing, with Sam Altman saying that you got to ask the question, if a human brain only takes 20 watts of power, yet these data centers are taking up, nuclear power plants worth of power, and they're saying it's more expensive to raise a human. You have to ask, what's the big deal? Why is it so expensive to raise a human? And it's because of every rent-seeking parasite along every stage of living as a human being that is nickeling and diming your existence just for you to participate in society. And that is why human beings are so expensive. It's funny when Sam Altman came up with that point, saying that it's just going to be, cheaper to power a data center than it is to raise a human being. And it's funny is because the fact is the only reason it's expensive to be a human being today is because they rent seek at every possible corner, whether it be through groceries, rent, housing, whatever, just for somebody to participate in civilization. See, the problem is when you have a nation of rent seekers, you can't actually get the true value of things because at the end of the day, everybody's just trying to nickel and dime one another. Yeah, Altman talks about how expensive it is to raise a human when he forgets that humans aren't just a brain and jar. They're in control of a body capable of more than No, the funny part is that, like, what I'm trying to get at here, guys, it's funny is because the reason why I made that example in that AI video is because everybody talks about, like, data centers being cheaper than humans. In dollar terms, yes. But in terms of raw, actual energy, because that's what matters at the end of the day, in terms of physics, the human brain only takes 20 watts of power. It's significantly cheaper to power a human brain than it does any of these data centers for much more complex tasks because you're competing against millions of years of evolution. So why is it numerically in terms of dollars far more expensive to finance a human being than it does a power plant or these data centers? Because at every stage of civilization, we have endless paths of rent seeking just to participate in civilization, just to sustain a human being that drives up the cost of what it means to, live. And the reason I know this is the case is because you go to a third world country where, you can actually afford things. You can take the American dollar out there and you can live like a king. Just goes to show how inflated the cost of living really is here. Because all of this is just artificial scarcity. It's completely artificial to essentially inflate the value of a handful of rich pedophiles to get their 10th or 11th yacht while gaslighting everybody through their massive propaganda apparatus on social media. So just take that to heart. Remember that is because every time they talk about how human beings are just more expensive, what's driving up the cost to be a human being? Why don't you ask these rich billionaires that? Why is it so expensive to live when we live in the most technologically advanced period in human history? Is because the scarcity that you and I are going through is artificial. Humans are better in dollars too. We create usable products. Well, actually, yeah, in long-term sustainability, yeah, even with all the rent-seeking going at every stage of civilization, driving up the cost of labor, yes, it's still cheaper to hire a human being. And that's what they're discovering with this token crisis with AIs now with all these demands of profitability. But imagine that. It's funny that they said for years that, like, AI is going to be cheaper, but if you actually look at the raw numbers, it's actually cheaper for a human just to exist and get, like, a place to live than it is for these machines. They'll cope about it. Taking U.S. dollar to foreign nations is their plan to colonize those regions. They kind of already have to some degree. Human organ donors should have to lower the price. Should lower the price to lives to save organs. Well, I mean, there'd be more healthy organ donors if they would just allow people to live a moderate, decently standard of living. Let's be real here. It's like if everybody's, being forced to live on the margins because of the cost of living crisis, like, you're not going to really have, like, any high-quality donors. Well, the Ivanka Trump interview about the island is so surreal. Oh, this country's a sinking ship. No other country that's watching the United States implode from abroad. It's kind of funny is because the billionaire class would probably gaslight American, wages like ourselves as being responsible for this crash when, let's be honest here, most people in this chat, average, ordinary Americans, are hardworking people. They're not an issue for the rest of the world. But the funny part is if these rich pedophiles were to flee to these other countries, what country's going to accept these rich pedophiles into their countries? They literally can't. Mark Zuckerberg has tried for years to get into China. They're not going to let them in. No smart country is going to let these people in. They contribute no value to civilization. They ain't got anywhere to go. Ecuador literally uses US dollars and everything is cheap as fuck there. The rent seeking in the US is insane. And I think I know why the rent seeking is going on, what up, is because the fact is that they're trying to make the United States be the final tomb of the boomer, the eternal boomer. It's just supposed to be where, like, they don't care about anything else. It's like, what's convenient to the boomers, what ultimately matters. They price fix things to keep people out of their neighborhoods and communities. So, you know, that's essentially what all it is. They will blame AI hacking on the banks collapsing. Yeah, they probably will. They'll probably just blame the Chinese. Like they always do. So how's your guys' work weeks going? Because I know more people, and yeah, let's get some green hats in the chat. Why not, man? But how's your work week going? I can't say mine's that great. Hidden sugars, hidden seed oils, hidden chemicals. The natural stuff is overpriced. That's already artificially inflated in the first place. All this is just being driven up. If they can't go to China, where will they go? Well, the thing is this is how you know our ruling class isn't that bright, Katsura. Is that they don't know. Peter Thiel fleed off to Argentina. That you want to talk about just sad? It's like even he's more self-aware than most of the other plutocrats who run our country. Bing's chilling. But it's amazing that the cost of living crisis has gotten so bad. It's just absolutely borderline unlivable. Like, I've said it multiple times on my channel. I don't need to beat around the bush. It's kind of funny when that one dipshit J889 was basically saying, like, do your fans know that you have a house and you're talking all these things? I'm like, yeah. Me and my wife, the only reason I have it is because my wife works too and we both dual income. And that was a mistake, is because when we had job troubles, it's like, you know, it was a bit of a life scare when she had some job troubles 3 months ago. And, you know, me being a single income earner, could I really afford the house? No, not really. And now my job troubles. It's like, employers wonder why people are not settling down, having families and kids, okay? That would be why. You know, my wife had job troubles back in February because of, you know, some issues with the healthcare system or whatever, right? I won't get too much into the specifics, right? So there was a big scare about that one. You want to talk about a detriment to health and mental health, like as if that doesn't do it, and then this currently, you know, as of right now with my job, it's like, you know, what's their goal here? Nobody can afford to settle down and have a family at all. It's obviously not sustainable. Is it just sadistic cruelty? Did they just hate the working class that much? It's like they talk about, you know, wanting to bring back families so people can have a decent standard of living. But, like, what vehicles are they giving them? Be real here, okay? How many dual incomers exist in my chat, okay? How many people are single incomers? And how many people are still living with families because the fact is it's quite literally too expensive to leave, you know, the family house in the first place? Let's talk about that. How many of you guys live with your parents? How many of you guys live on your own? And how many people are dual incoming like me and my wife? And, you know, let's talk about it. It's because the fact is I have a strong feeling that a lot of you who are actually on your own, you know, looking at the numbers, you know, I'm an engineer and I'm just making, you know, barely enough to afford a place. It's like, I know, you know, just lower on the totem pole, you're not able to get that much further. So let's chat about it. Argentina has a pretty extreme leftist culture. Well, yeah, that's why Peter Thiel's a fucking retard for going to Argentina. It's like they don't have an enfranchised working class like the United States is. They're gonna hate you more. So, oh, freezing limb, dude. I have not seen you in a while. You're an old sub, man. Hope you're doing well. You're fucking ancient, man. So, yeah, I live with 2 roommates and we all earn at least triple the minimum wage. Yeah, I could believe that. So about $21 an hour. Deconstructing narcissism makes about $20 an hour. Has 3 roommates. We struggling to get savings together. Me and my wife are, see, the funny part is I would say living on my own, but I'm living with my wife, so that counts as like 1 roommate, right? But the thing is, it's like, how are they expecting? Me and my wife were looking at apartments. This is how fucked up and evil this country is. And this is why you should hate this country. Get some green hats in this fucking chat. We were looking at 3-bed, 2-bath apartments. You know, the standard, like, you know, 1,200 square footer, you know, that's just a starter property for somebody to settle down and all these sorts of things, right? Just the starter property. You know, it was designed in this almost vertical layout where all 3 bedrooms were lined up against one another, and there's this narrow section for a kitchen and like a TV stand. And unironically, it was basically looked like a bachelor pad that was designed to house 3 single men and live off of a supply of pizza rolls. Nothing to settle down and have a family with. Nothing related to settling down and have a family with. It was designed to be a bachelor pad. That's the way they're designing these things. Let's get some fucking green hats in the chat. Because, like, unironically, this counts as fucking genocide. You know, what they're doing to us. Because it's just evil, like, how they've essentially all put us in the position. Every single one of us. What are these crystals down here? Get some Luigi hats in here. So yeah, that's the Luigi hats I like to see. Feels like an uncomfortable living space. Yeah, we've all been made alien in our own homeland. Hopefully one day we can take it back from the rich pedophiles. And then we can strap them to rockets and launch them in the stratosphere. Yeah, no, the funny part is that, like, Space Builder, you just said you need to live comfortably, minimum wage needs to be $50 an hour, okay? I work as a full-time engineer, and I'm just slightly above that, and I still cannot afford an average house. The only reason I have a house is because my wife works, right? So that's why I was asking in the chat, how many of you guys, live with your parents? There's no shame in that. Cost of living is terrible. How many of you guys, live on your own? How many of you guys require roommates? Let's get into it, man. Because, like, we're all kind of in this together. Unless if you're part of the bourgeois class. Unless you're part of the wealthy class, it can kind of get away with it. But, luckily, I make a livable wage of 40K. It's worth trading my life for. Livable wage and 40K in the big 26, man. How do you make it? Endless. I want to know how. Like, I have to know how, okay? I would love to live where you're at if 40K was making. I would rather make 40K and make it than make 100K and still not be able to afford the average house. I live during the winter with 5 guys, during the summer in my car. That's brutal. Eugenics only came from America. I live at home, though I'm alone for most of the year. Kind of glad that's the case. Yeah. Grandparents, because nobody is taking care of them. Yeah, if you're living with your folks, man, I'm going to be honest with you. If you can and you got nice folks, that's probably the smart move. And the funny part is that, like, we've already, people under the age of 30 living with their parents is already over 50% nowadays. That's how bad the cost of living crisis is. And that's not even my own words. That's from, like, Economics Explained. And he's about as bourgeois of an economist as it possibly gets. The standard shaming tactics are you live with your parents because you're just lazy or whatever, right? But the truth is, do you really want to be in my position where you're just, you have job instability, where you have a place that you need to afford and then, possibly end up homeless or maybe having, stuff like that? Alistair, what's your wokest take? Okay, I'm going to be honest with you. As much as I have more of a right-wing audience nowadays than I did previously, I actually... Here's my hot take. Funny part is because, like, the last video was designed to be a bit of a bait. I actually don't have a problem with I don't have a problem with LGBTQ people. I don't have a problem with feminists. I don't have a problem with gay people. I don't even have a problem with immigrants, particularly in any particular instance. It's just the thing is the capitalist class abuses it to essentially undercut, suppress people's wages, and then make everybody poor while they offshore jobs. So that's probably my wokest take. I don't have a problem with any particular group. I don't even have a problem with women, even though I was talking with Undead Chronic. He's known for talking about these things. Obviously, it's in relation to, the way feminism was for, like, years. But, that's my wokest take. Now, will I go out of my way to prove that I'm woke, to prove that I don't have a problem with these groups? No, is because here's the thing about the so-called woke left. Okay, here's the thing about the so-called woke left. The problem is that when it comes to talking about any kind of social or cultural politics with that particular side of the aisle, you could say you don't have a beef with any of these groups and stuff like that, and the onus will be on you to prove to you that you're not that, okay? If you say, you're racist on the alt-right, what's up, Texan? I hope you're doing well. I noticed you. But if you were on the alt-right and you were like to say, I hate Jews or something like that, most people would take it at face value, maybe with a handful of dipshits that'll do some kind of purity testing bullshit. Right, saying, well, you're not a real anti-Semite unless you do X. With the left to say you don't have a beef against any particular group, that dynamic doesn't really exist, right? So you can't have politically incorrect humor. I've been an edgy fuckwit since I was a kid, so I've never really cared about, like, not saying offensive humor, even since back in the day. So, it didn't really mesh well with the so-called progressive left. Even if I don't even have a beef with any of those particular groups I just listed, it will never be good enough for that particular group. So that's my wokest take. I really don't think Americans will revolt when more they could do of us. See, that's the thing. Maybe the United States won't revolt, Hannibal, and I'm personally okay with that. Is because at the end of the day, it's like the people always get the rulers they deserve. It's like, the United States. The thing is that with the United States, it's like, if you don't do it, it's going to collapse on its own anyways. Because this is unsustainable. People are going to quietly check out. Younger generations are going to leave the country. More people are leaving in the United States now, since, like, the Great Depression, the 1930s, when, Hitler rose to power. times of extreme strife. More people are leaving now than then, and that's how bad it has gotten here in the United States. So maybe the United States won't have a revolt. There's been plenty of empires throughout history that quite literally collapse under their own weight, and the United States might actually be, quite, decent certainty, just that. An empire that will collapse under its own weight over the course of 100 years and maybe devolve into smaller kingdoms. Yeah, the no true Scotsman. Yeah, I remember the whole no true Scotsman argument back in the days, because that was a big talking point with the anti-SJW stuff. But the progressive left didn't really care about those talking points because they were too busy proving that they're, woke or whatever, right? That they have those sorts of things. And that just ended up not working anyways because it just pissed everybody off. So, if you're lucky, you'll have 100K after 5 years. It means you'll have to be by the 23 to start at 18. I think the biggest issue in the modern civil rights advocates is they fail to appeal to their audience and blame groups like white men. Dude, I've said that for years. And it's like, if the left just drops, blaming white men for everything, you can make some decent numbers and talk about some substantive issues. Even now, even though the fact is we're literally in probably the most anti-economic left-like period in American history, it's like, you can still bring out these talking points to talk about these things. Now, of course, like, some jackass boomer is going to get upset saying you're talking about Marxism or communism, like that one jackass in the comment section. But the thing is that if you just drop the anti-white male bullshit, you can go pretty far. But, the progressive left couldn't do that. And the interesting thing is that, like, even the Kamala Harris, like, Democrat Party tried to do the whole, like, gay masculinity LARP stuff, being like, well, real men do X. It's like, that's never going to sell with young men, dude. They've done the performative masculinity stuff. Young men turned against that when the right started doing that. It just doesn't work. You can't treat people like shit and then expect them to be loyal to you. It all goes down to enfranchisement. It's a very simple principle. If you want to be treated nice, you have to treat people nice. I'm living with my parents while my house is being built. I need a roommate, though. Dude, I get it. If you got your house, if you're building a new construction or whatever, and you can afford it, that's totally good, too. They will never drop the anti-white thing. And good for them. You know what? If they want to be anti-white all they want, they can. That's kind of the interesting thing, is because, like, there were a couple of people that were third worldists that were getting mad at me for, like, kind of straw-manning third worldists for that. Because, like, a lot of third worldists, actually from the third world don't have a beef with, regular-ass Americans. I appreciate it, man. Thanks, Solomon. I appreciate it. Welcome to the chat. You've become my favorite YouTuber lately. I do appreciate that, man. So, the thing is, they don't necessarily have a beef with, like, ordinary Americans, but the thing is that, like, sometimes they can become a bit harsh, is because the fact is they have their predicated notion that everybody in the United States is equally enfranchised a part of the first world, when all of you guys are here because we're not. We're not a part of the boomer generation. We're not a part of that enfranchised imperial core, and that's the reason why we talk about these politics. And they try to run their little propaganda campaigns to psyop and gaslight us, but at the end of the day, it's like, you can't expect somebody to toe your narrative unless if you actually enfranchise them to have a reason to toe your narrative. They just don't do that. And so, they're surprised that it just doesn't work out. That's why I try to be a little more, I don't go anti-third worldist, is because the fact is I always tell them at the end of the day, it's like, the United States is a dying empire, okay? You can hate the United States, you can hate white people, you can hate, the European sphere, North America, whatever, right? And, I'm not even gonna, like, fight you on that one. But the thing is Europe and the United States is becoming increasingly irrelevant on the world stage. What do you care what us Europeans think about your country? Even American imperialism is going down the drain. The Iran, epic pedo fury has been an absolute flop. Where has that gone? It's not gone anymore. And so, at the end of the day, it's like, the reason I don't antagonize third worldists, but I also don't capitulate to their narratives of just being anti-European or anti-American, is because the fact is, it's like, what do you care about what Europeans and Americans think? Eventually, in maybe 25 years, the American empire is going to be irrelevant. It already kind of is with this, Iran operation. So, that's the way I see it. I took a completely different approach, because the fact is, it's like, you get stuck into the pro-US side or something like that, or you end up being on, like, the pro-China side, you just end up being a geopolitical simp and anti-Western European or something. And I find both sides just kind of towing a propaganda talking point, which I have never found myself, inclined to subscribe to, because it's retarded, Nazbols are really some strange freaks. Yeah, I guess you could say that. That's because Alistair has principle. He isn't going to sell to the far right, even if the left calls him racist. Yeah, no, I genuinely don't have a beef with any particular ethnic group, really. I really don't have a beef with anybody. Now, obviously, I'm going to be an offensive, edgy asshole, and I've been that since I was, like, a teenager, but that's not going to change that at all. It's like, I don't have a beef with particular anybody. You know, that's why I can't necessarily go down the same route. Maybe that's probably one thing Undead Chronic and I would probably agree with a little bit, disagrees, because he's a little bit more hostile towards, like, you know, those outsider groups outside of Western Europeans than I am. It's like, I just kind of recognize America's a dying empire, and I just kind of want to have, like, the United States be at least a semi-livable place during its decline, and not just selling everything out to boomers and out offshoring boomers just for their, you know, convenience and pleasure. What's truly depressing is that in the West, the resources still the top of the... What's truly depressing is that the West, in general, still has the resources to be top dog, but the billionaires are so addicted to money that they're ruining it all. Yeah. That's essentially it. It's fuck you, got mine mentality. That's the reason why we're all here. Because we're a part of the dying empire, and we're just killing time as it slowly croaks, and we deal with the consequences of a dying empire. So, welcome to the celebration. You know, probably a couple of third worldists that are like, hell yeah, death to America or some shit, you know. I respect the rage. I understand it. I understand why you'd hate the United States. Obviously, I can't hate my own country just because it's my own country, but you know. Get some leathers, because I need to build some iron armor. Nazbol, we prefer nationalism, but to international, but the Soviets fell due to the circus or something. Yeah, the Nazbols are for people. Nazbols, and the funny part is I get called a Nazbol a couple of times because I'm willing to talk to both sides. I focus primarily on economic leftism is because I care about the cost of living crisis, because, you know, who would have thought that if you're possibly on the brink where wife might lose her job, or, you know, you might lose your job, or you might lose your house, you might lose your bread and butter, like that would be the centerpiece of your politics. So... Yo, Alistair, do you have any stories with HR? Actually, yeah. I had an awesome story with HR. Literally happened today. I got pulled in because the fact is I've talked about my commute on this channel quite a bit, where it's been, you know, incredibly taxing. So now they basically, you know, wanted to summon me for a discussion about a loss of performance because of you know, the commute that's been really taking a toll on it. Never mind the fact that when my wife was possibly going to lose her job like 3 months ago, they were completely cold-hearted and obstinate with that. They didn't give a shit. Never mind anything else. It's like, you know, but, you know, they wanted to talk about the performance stuff. So I go in and I talk to them. It's like, hey, it's like, I'm trying to work with you as much as possible, but you're making this, you know, actually infeasible to show up to work because you literally did a full RTO, you know, in the middle of a gas crisis. And, you know, they were just completely, they don't care, man. At the end of the day, they're there to protect the company. They're there to basically make the company money. They don't give a shit. And the funny part is, the most ironic part about that performance discussion, Joshua, even somebody in my background, it's kind of crazy. Somebody in my background can't even have a stable job. Like how disrespected engineering is these days. Is that, you know, the HR person was remote working during the whole thing, while I, you know, where they're doing an RTO for all the engineers. What a world it is nowadays. It's crazy the level that we've gotten to. Line in scraps. I need to kill some skeletons for that one. So that one sucks. But that's my story with HR. And that was today, mind you. That's got me looking for another job, is because I'm going to be honest, this company's fucking sucked ass. Like, I could give you a gorillion stories about how this place is uniquely sucked. They took away, like, remote work perms literally 5 months after me and my wife bought a house. We wanted a slice of the American dream, and that got basically ripped away. We tried to offer them as like, hey, can you give us time to sell so we could relocate closer to the property now that you're doing a full RTO? They were like, no, we don't care. We want you to show up right now. Like, we're going to hold this against you. This is a, you know, a drop in performance. You need to show up right now. And it's like, you're not going to give any instance. You know, even the fact is that, like, we've gone through financial struggles. You just don't give a shit. And typical, they don't give a shit. So, hey, Alice, did you see the UK is going postal before the US? You know, after the Henry Nowak thing, I'm really not surprised. I'm really not surprised. It's like, you're going to see more of that happen. It sucks, but it is what it is. Jesus, HR has gone too far. No, I agree. It fucking sucks, but it is what it is. If it's a pip, you need to go. Oh no, it's a pip. It's a pip. And that goes to show you, you know, beneficent is that not even engineering's a safe job anymore. It's pretty tragic, but you know, it is what it is. You know, I never thought I would see the day where, you know, I would say, you know, engineering is a less safe job now. If you would have told me any of this stuff about how jobs are nowadays 10 years ago, I would have laughed at you. Be like, no, engineer is one of those safe jobs. No, it's not. They don't really give a shit. I'm underpaid, you know, and the fact is it doesn't even afford the average house. You'll never guess who I actually work for. If it ever came out, it would probably go fucking viral. But the thing is that, you know, all these things, you know, it's amazing they're prioritized. They prioritize public speakers more than they actually do engineers. The people who, and even blue-collar workers, too. I'll bring them in there is because the fact is they're also the builders of civilization. The people who actually build things, deprioritize. Because we were talking about, like, you know, I was talking with one of my buddies who's a lawyer. We were talking about, like, unemployment, like, you know, unemployment termination, wrongful termination settlements and stuff like that. They have all these slush funds for, like, PR disasters where they throw you a bunch of hush money so you don't be a negative, you know, PR disaster for their company and all that sorts of stuff, right? They have all this money to basically play damage control for their PR, but not to pay their engineers a livable salary to afford the average house to settle down and have a family. Imagine that. That is the world we live in. And that is why you can look at American propaganda, why they focus so much more on propaganda than actually making an effective, you know, country, and why they're failing so spectacularly in Iran. And maybe this is for the better that they're failing so spectacularly, is because the fact is an empire as corrupt as that, maybe it does deserve to fall under its own weight. I won't lie about that. Is because, you know, how can you be so stupid to just quite literally prioritize intangibles, speechcraft, instead of actually building things? I will never understand. My first job was printing in an office for employment for foreign workers. You know, I wonder if we would have had streets paved in gold by now if we increased time and productivity. You probably could have. RTO is 100% a humiliation ritual. They did RTO 5 months after me and my wife bought a house. We thought we were building ourselves a slice of the American dream. And then they're doing this stuff. After 3 months ago, my wife was having some job troubles. Do they ever wonder why people are not settling down into families? Because me and my wife talked about that. We were kind of sitting there. It's like, do they ever think when they're playing these fucking games, like why people don't settle down and have families? Alistair, when you grow, please don't forget us and become a Democrat entryist who sells out for the Democrats. You know what? I'm going to be honest with you. Because I've been on this side of the aisle, whatever base I do big, if I do get big, like you say, right? I'm going to weaponize my base as a strong arm to essentially get the ruling class to at least compromise on some of the things that... The funny part is that, like, there's a way. Let's get into politics, okay? Let's get into power politics, okay? Because we need to talk about negotiating with the powers that be to essentially get them to do what we want, okay? The thing is these people don't listen to you unless you have a base. Unless if you have a base that's willing to actually back you up, these people in power won't listen, okay? Now, obviously, you've got to show that there's some degree that, you know, you're not going to step on their toes too much, where there's an opportunity for them to cooperate with you. But the thing is you need a base to essentially... No, if I ever get into a position where I seriously blow up, dude, I'm not selling out my base, because I remember what it was like to be before I had a base. Similar to you guys. Similar to, you know, being... Because the thing is, we're all sharing the same experience, talking about the same cost of living crisis. We're all, into some, you know, degree in a similar situation, is because of the negligence and the ineffectiveness and incompetence of our ruling class. I'm not going to forget about that. In fact, I would 100% weaponize my base as much as possible to actually get meaningful compromises and concessions from the ruling class. Now, obviously, you have to be reasonable with that stuff because you need to essentially get them to bend the knee, but you don't want to basically make them where they're going to go after you because you're too much of a threat with them. You need... See, the thing is, I'm the kind of person to basically... You got to break their knee. You can't necessarily get rid of them entirely. Because the thing is, you need them to cooperate with you to actually, you know, follow through with you as opposed to just being a mortal enemy. Right? It's because you need to bend their knee, essentially, to get what you want. Because the goal is not necessarily about total destruction. As much as it's fun to talk about how much I hate the ruling class, and I would probably, I don't want to get too fed posting on the channel, right? As much as I hate the ruling class, right? Essentially, we want to get our goals. We want our compromises. We want our concessions. And that's ultimately the goal. If we can get a better standard of living, we can pass, like, certain policies. You know, that's far more important than necessarily, you know, going into some kind of, like, holy jihad war against the ruling class. As much as that would be funny and hilarious to go total jihad on the wealthy. Watch that get, you know, quote mined for a Fox News, you know, interview where they're talking about evil Alistair and his evil sadistic audience. You know, just imagine that. But, you know, again, you know, they all know why we're here. We're talking about the cost of living crisis. The answer is it cheaper stuff or to pay more? Currency is our new god. I'm going to head back to the surface. I think I got some more leather. I'm trying to find some skeletons, and it hasn't been nighttime yet in this game yet. which is kind of sucky, is because the fact is I need to kill some skeletons to get some lining so I can actually build some iron armor. But no, I wouldn't betray my bases, because the fact is like that's political power to actually make the ruling class bend its knee. Think about it this way. The wealthy would have never listened to us if we stood alone individually. In fact, I tried to stand alone talking to HR to bring reason and truth and speaking truth to power. And I, as a lone individual, they didn't listen at all. Even if these takes were completely reasonable, they didn't give a shit. But the thing is, when you have a base, an army, you know, then they listen. Because now you have bargaining power. You have might. You honestly wish for deflation because the job market is trash like many liberals said it would be with deflation. Yeah, it's true. 12 terabytes of CP has been insult to your PC, Alistair. Yeah, I could believe that. They would try that. They would 100% try that so they could do a little bit of a smear. But that's anybody who gets too uppity or mouthy for the ruling class. When is it ever going to turn nighttime? I need to kill some skeletons. We must devote our lives to the dollar. All revolution people in the chat need to learn about elite theory. Absolutely. So, you know, just to show the fact is that we've got enough people. Let's put some Luigi hats in the chat. Let's show some energy to the ruling class that we don't capitulate. We don't cuck out. We know what we want. You know what we want. So just start spamming the chat with Luigi hats, because the fact is the stronger our numbers are, the bigger we are, you know, the more we can actually use that as leverage to get what we want from the ruling class. And that's the point, is because the fact is they wouldn't have listened to us as individuals, but maybe as a collective, as in a group that poses a threat to them, maybe they will listen to that. So let's get some green hats in the chat. Start spamming the shit out of it. Get as many Luigi hats in the chat as possible. Just start spamming the shit out. I want to see it rotating like a rotary dial. Get that fucking Luigi energy out there so we can see some green hats spinning out in the chat. Put some energy behind it, is because the fact is I need you guys to fucking roar like a lion. Okay? Because they ain't gonna listen to a pussycat. They ain't gonna listen to somebody they ain't got a growl. It's like that one Flappa meme that I posted on my shorts section, right? The reason that shit's funny is because that cat has a growl and is scary as fuck. And so the ruling class needs to see us the same way. Just don't get the CIA award excellence in journalism. Dude, I'm gonna be honest with you. With how little we're getting fucking paid these days, just cut to the chase and put a bullet in my fucking head. It's like, I don't like this bullshit. I ain't got time for the bullshit. It's like, you know, they could have done the enfranchisement stuff. Don't really give a fuck. I'm gonna be like Butcher. Be like, would you skip to the part and just put a bullet in my fucking head if you're gonna go down this route? How's the Luigi trial going on? So here's the thing about the Luigi trial. They're trying to push it out of public spotlight to hope that people will forget about it. We're not going to forget about it. You know how many people remember Luigi, even though they keep pushing back the trial so people can forget it? All the people in my chat spamming Luigi hats remember Luigi. We remember what Brian Thompson did. We remember what United Healthcare did. We remember what these CEOs are doing to us right now. So, yeah, no, we don't forgive. We don't forget. That sounds like anonymous and it's cringe as shit, but you get my point. Glad we got those green hats in the chat. I like seeing that energy. We need to get some more energy in this chat, is because the fact is I need you guys to be like a fucking lion. Because the more that we get on our side, the more we grow on our base, yeah, then we have leverage against the ruling class. Everybody knows Luigi, and that pisses off the ruling class because it went exactly opposite of the way it intended it to. And that's what happens when you disenfranchise so many people. The funny part is it costs them nothing. It's pennies on the dollars to enfranchise people, and they know it because they don't respect people as an individual. Maybe they'll respect us as a group, as a party, as an army, or whatever, right? As our numbers swell. More people are going to be joining us in this. Some people have called Luigi a patsy and a psyop. You know, the funny part is, even if he is, here's the interesting thing about that hypothesis, because I thought about that for a little while back when the incident first happened, right? Let the government Hampton you, Alistair. Fred Hampton. I had somebody actually mention Fred Hampton's name. I respect that guy. The one guy that was actually able to form an alliance between, you know, deep pick Southerners and also black nationalists. Impressive guy. The Hampton Award. We're going to call it the Hampton Award. To talk about class issues, you know, beyond racial lines. Respect that guy. We won't let the guy... I'm going to be honest with you. They Hamptoned me. They gave me the award in journalism. I want you guys to basically carry on the legacy even after my death as a middle finger to show that my people aren't pussies and they don't capitulate to these people. Yeah, I don't want my death, if my death were to ever occur, to be a humiliation ritual to disenfranchise you, disenchant you, and make you feel disillusioned or even second-guess yourself. That's what I want you to do. Even post-death me would say, you know what? Don't let my death be a depressor to you. Just carry on and continue giving that middle finger to the ruling class. That's all the green hat is. It's a middle finger to the ruling class. And I want you to carry that middle finger higher for the wealthy, so they know that we will not be intimidated into submission and we will always hate their ass. So don't let my death dissuade you or set you into a fear or panic. That's what I say to you guys. So they want to do a CIA journalism thing? You know, be my guest. I ain't gonna get mad at that. Yeah, unironically. The funny part is that, like, I don't want a single person weeping for my death. I don't want them to live in fear because of what happened to me. I want them to carry on what I already talked about, because that's the point, is because the fact is I don't want you to be paralyzed in fear over me. I want you to carry on, is because the fact is that you don't need to live in fear of these people. Yeah, they made the company even more cutthroat, the typical bourgeois nonsense. United Healthcare is one of the scummiest companies on the face of the fucking planet. Everybody who's dealt with insurance with them knows how scummy they are. Don't be paralyzed with fear. That's my message today. Don't be paralyzed with fear. You know, because, like, of course, like, the whole point of making people disappear is so that their followers live in fear. Don't let fear paralyze you on standing up for what's right. FISA is an AI blackmail program that's more than it is surveillance. Yeah, good. FISA is an AI blackmail. See, this is the thing. This is the reason why they want to use AI, okay? I'll go ahead and get into it a little bit. The reason they like AI is because the fact is it's essentially a giant dossier generator machine. You know, that's essentially all Palantir is. It's about how can we form a dossier on people. Why is it all fiery? It's like I'm entering into the pits of hell or something like that. Yeah. Do you mod? I don't know. I think that depends on who you ask. Okay, so I'm going to the level. Do you mog? I don't know. I consider myself an average-looking guy. Yeah, everybody has fear, okay? Everybody has fear about everything. I have fear. I have fear about the fact is I might not have a job. I might lose my house. You know, but one thing I can be for sure about is that I still have a woman that loves me. That's a plus. So even with all these things going on with this PIP crap, you know, the layoffs and all that stuff, how bad the tech job market is, at least I got a woman that loves me. So that's a plus. You know, there's always going to be a job out there, and just as long as we got each other, we don't really give a shit. So it is what it is. But you can't necessarily live in fear of this stuff. Here's this thing. It's okay to feel fear. I'm scared as shit of what's going on in my life right now, and I have no doubt that you guys are afraid of what's going on in your life. But, you know, courage isn't necessarily like an antidote to anything. Courage is a choice in the face of fear. It's not an emotion. It's a choice that one makes in the face of fear and something that scares them. And so, you know, courage feels a lot like fear in a sort of sense, because even though you're scared shitless of whatever is about to happen, you're still standing up for yourself. That's the important part. It's okay to be scared shitless of things. You know, I've had buddies who've been, like, shot at, you know, because they were in the military, and they told me what it was like to be in their first firefight, and it's like, god damn, I would have fucking pissed myself if I was ever in my first firefight. But, you know, the thing is that courage feels a lot like fear, is because you'll get through it anyways. Tulsi talks about FISA, gets briefed and reverses course. Johnson went through the same thing. Fun trick, never be blackmailed. Be proud of your grossness. You know, the funny part, Eagle Cash, unironically, the thing is you want to know the secret about PR and blackmail? Okay, so when it comes to PR, when it comes to, you know, anything that's contentious within the public eye, you either don't do it or you double down on it. That's the secret of PR. So you can never be blackmailed if you're not doing anything that's overly contentious or bad, or the fact is you just don't really care. It's like being politically incorrect. Like, one guy was coming into my chat accusing me of being, like, you know, a racist incel, even though I'm married and I don't personally particularly care about, like, you know, the you know, immigrants in my own right. But the thing is, it's like, you know, the thing is you can't really, like, expose anybody on anything if you just don't give a shit, you know. Looks maxers get too much hate. I like them. They're the problem solvers. They're just realistic. Looks maxers are just essentially, I wouldn't say they're problem solvers. Looks maxers can get a little bit retarded. I'm just more on the ideal of, you know, recognizing that looks matter. And that's all there is to it. If somebody wants to look smack, that's informed off of the idea that looks matter already. And that's totally okay. If somebody wants to go down that route, that's okay. That's their choice. You know, whatever makes you feel better, whatever gives you a more fulfilling life, if that's your, you know, shtick. I can't find any skeletons. I think I'm gonna have to just go scouring the lands because the thing. Oh, I can actually get some land and scraps. Never mind, we're good. Look at that. So, the funny part about being laid off from this job is, you know, there's plenty of times to look for new jobs. So that's all I'm doing. But the only problem is that because we're probably entering a recession, it's going to be tough to find a job. I had guns pull on me, taking to people scares me too. Yeah, of course, anybody's afraid of that to happen. What mod is this? It's not a mod. It's just a hightail. I'm not afraid of anything in particular. Get real skills and you'll be fine. Firefights are great. Are annoying more than scary. It's just chaos. Although I find peaceful in chaos. So you've been around that. Yeah. I'm gonna be honest with you. Being shot at, I'd be fucking terrified. Not gonna lie. But, you know, then again, my buddy was telling me that he was, like, shit terrified when he first got shot at. He was like, okay, yeah, that's fucking scary. I don't, you dude. Okay, I am definitely gonna need to get some. I am totally. Oh, these guys are gonna toast me, dude. And that was a ton of them that just came out of there. Alistair, when you get big, do you see yourself becoming one of those internet surrogate father figures like Jordan Peterson or Sam Hyde or Medicare? I don't know if I would consider myself like a paternalistic figure to really go down that route. You know, I'm just the guy who gives us 2 cents. And I don't think I could be a Jordan Peterson. You know, if it happens, it happens. But that's the way I see it. You know, even with like the interview with like Undead Chronic, it's like, you know, I'm just basically giving my 2 cents and like what I think is like, you know, the best way for guys to kind of look out for themselves. You know, I thought Hightail was abandonware. It was abandoned for a very long time, and then somehow it got revived. Okay, now I gotta figure out how not to die in this next couple of seconds. It was originally announced in like 2015, and it was supposed to be like an alternative, more refined version of Minecraft, like an upgraded Minecraft, but it was in development hell for like 10 years, and then recently they just came out with the beta. So, looks matter, however, it's not the #1 important thing. Mogging is unproven science. It came from... Dude, the whole mogging thing, as funny as that shit is, it's not necessarily true. I'm gonna go ahead and construct as many of these things as possible, because I am almost on the brink of death. Is Jordan Peterson doing all right? See, Jordan Peterson's an interesting character. I used to like some of his content back in the day because he talked a lot about self-improvement, and I did like that. I was going through a pretty bleak period in my life when I did find his content. Probably not that unfamiliar to currently, but the thing is, I like some of his earlier content, but the thing is, like, as soon as he started talking like the bioessentialism stuff, started going into like Radcuck stuff, it's like I kind of just tuned out on him. So, logging proves that Rat Utopia is already here. You know, we're going into Rat Utopia. Yeah, the Rat Utopia. I remember first hearing about that in 2017. A couple of people were like, no, you can't talk about Rat Utopia. And I'm pretty sure, I don't know, maybe you guys already know this, but Rat Utopia was it was basically, it was Mouse Utopia, essentially. It's not Rat Utopia, Mouse Utopia, I forgot. But Mouse Utopia was the idea that they got a whole bunch of mice, you know, into a post-scarcity world where they would have everything. Originally, the whatever you want to call it, the experiment was designed to prove overpopulation, the negative effects of overpopulation. That was what the original experiment was supposed to go out and prove. But the thing is, they ended up discovering a ton of other sociological consequences as a consequence as well. You know, namely that, like, you know, what happened was there were a handful of males that would basically conquer all the land within the territory, you know, and basically start forming harems, essentially. And this is obviously where it gets into the hypergamy stuff, right? And there was a formation of a new type of male that kind of came out as a consequence that would not actually be landed. They would not own land, but they were known as the beautiful ones. They would focus mostly on grooming, but they would make no attempt to actually reproduce or, you know, go towards the female mice. You know, and so a lot of people kind of draw up those parallels, you know, to modern society, to kind of, you know, draw parallels with, you know, modern society. Okay, I don't have anything to make any parts with, mostly because I don't have any leather, and that means I need to kill more rats. Speaking of Mouse Utopia. What's up, Common? Welcome to the stream. Hope you're doing well. Ants the movie. So mostly what's happening in the United States is not really a consequence of overabundance to prove overpopulation. It's just quite literally that you have a, the vast majority of living space being occupied by a handful of males. So it's probably more, similar to like, Mouse Utopia in the sense that like a handful of properties being occupied by a handful of people, and we're just dealing with the sociological second order consequences of that with the collapse of like family formation. So like there is some parallel to Mouse Utopia. As soon as Jordan went down the Daily Wire, I felt his impending doom. Yeah. I used to kind of nickname him Dr. Keto Shits because he started like having like breakdowns, shortly after on being on his like keto diet and also his Xanax or something. Let's see if I can find some leather down here. Keto diets are an interesting one, is because now that like, if you remember back in like 2010s, like vegetarianism was like the holy diet that everybody wanted to do, but it's like, that was what keto was like 10 years ago. Now they're stuffing protein in everything. You notice that kind of backwards trend where now everything is protein? Keto is the modern vegetarian diet. I'm not finding any rats either. Must be hiding. Need some for leather. Don't talk to me until I've had my protein slop. Dude, Michaela's... Oh my god. I'm gonna be honest. I never really liked Michaela Peterson. She always gave me bad vibes. I'm not gonna lie. I remember when I like saw her and I was kind of like... there's something really off with that woman, could be wrong. South Korea is probably a perfect example of this. When I talked about like the incel stuff going on in South Korea as an example of like wealth inequality causing like, terrible dating dynamics, and the fact is like nobody can settle down in families, it's like South Korea is a perfect example of that. I always consider these countries to be like prequels to like what's going to happen in the United States if you just give it enough time. Seedling woods. Seedling woods, but I'm in a cave. It's not real protein, it's the bugs. It is literally just bugs, dude. You try to tell people, it's like protein can mean anything. Do you know like crushed up mosquitoes is like protein? Like technically? They can call a lot of things protein. I knew a guy who was in Canada Master's Program. The professor said he would punch anybody that watched Jordan Peterson. See, that's too excessive, is because I think Jordan Peterson's kind of retarded nowadays, but like I wouldn't say like punch-worthy retarded. Maybe Destiny. Somebody said they watched Destiny. It'd be like, okay, maybe you kind of deserve to be punched with that one. It's like the Omnicuck, really? God, I hope I can find a woman to marry before the U.S. becomes South Korea's sequel. You want to know the secret, okay? And this is going to go against all like red pill talking points or whatever, right? If you want to find a woman, and you might have noticed this is because there's a fair amount of women that also listen to this channel too, and we've talked about this as well when it comes to the cost of living crisis. Don't go for what like women, the red pill people talk about. The thing is, there's tons of women that are willing to do like dual income stuff, and you're going to have a much better relationship and a more honest relationship doing that. It's what I do. The thing is, you got to recognize that like, if you're going to do a dual income thing, it's like if she's going to help out with the household finances, you also need to help with the household chores. That's going to have to be an implicit assumption. So you can't just throw like the entire domestic affairs on one side of the aisle. And so a lot of the traditional side of the aisle will expect the woman to kind of take care of these things. And if you're somebody who's a fairly clean guy and you take care of yourself, you're hygienic and stuff, and you're capable of taking care of yourself, you probably could do a relationship just fine like that. You could do a dual income fairly well, is because the fact is you're largely a self-sufficient person. And that's personally what I recommend, especially with the cost of living crisis, because if you actually want to have a relationship in the modern economy, you kind of have to go this route. It's fucked up to say that, is because what killed the traditional relationship was not actually feminism or any culture bullshit. It's just the cost of living crisis. That is the thing that killed the traditional family. That's what killed, a single income household. Nobody can raise a family off of a single income anymore. Like, I mean, I just told you earlier in the stream, it's like, if my wife lost her job, it's like, we'd have a very difficult time getting by because my income's not enough to afford the house, and neither is hers now with my job, right? So it's kind of hard to have kids when the entire economy's like that. So only problem is you got to ask yourself if you want to have like kids. And I'm gonna be honest with you, like I could not imagine. Like the thing is, I've already got enough stress going on in my life. It's like, and bringing a family into this, it's like you would want to bring a family into this world, like, and you know, cause them undue amount of suffering. For what reason exactly? And I hate that talking point, but it is literally, it's like, if the economy just moved like 20 or 50% better, like, okay, maybe that'd be a different discussion, but like, be real here. You know, do you know what it takes to raise like another human being off a full-time job with tons of insecurity? Yeah. Where do you find these women? You know, hot take. This is gonna be kind of an interesting one. I'm legit planning on a vasectomy. Honestly, same. It sounds kind of stupid, but the thing is, like, you know, like getting somebody pregnant and like having kids in this economy, it's like not that great, dude. It's fucking terrifying. But where do you find these types of women? It just happens out of the blue with the right. I don't want to give like any rote, you know, way to get a particular person, is because more often than not, when you find somebody, you know, what's going to happen is it's going to happen out of the blue, and it's just going to happen randomly, and it's just going to kind of take off. And that's kind of how it happened for me. That's how I met my wife. You know, it just kind of happened out of the blue. We got together, got to know each other, and found out we had common interests, and it just kind of worked out. I think it's some more feather on this. So, there's not really a part or a way to do that. So what's the plan? Start a new political party, revolution, or where we stop working? Well, I'm just playing a game, chilling and chatting today, because got off work about quite literally 2 hours ago. Got home. Obama did a number on millennials. Yeah. Married women worked while being mothers before industrialism. I don't know why people pretend they didn't. Because, Katsura, is people pretend women don't work is because they have a particular notion that women didn't work. They just kind of sat around looking pretty all day. And that's from like a explicitly Anglo upper middle class perception of women. It's done a number on the expectations between men and women and what they expect out of their partners. Unfortunately. And so, you know, that's partly the reason. It's because, you know, men and women put these stupid expectations on one another, on what they want out of one another, rather than, you know, just kind of like having an honest discussion, like, how do you actually make things work? You know, that's the more important question, is like, can you have a functional relationship where you're not screwing one another over to have a decent life? And the unfortunate part is because of so many external forces, it's like, it's hard to just basically even like, oh, okay, sweet, I can get some more leather. Cool. Perfect. I just need to get enough for some armor. And Canada's worse with local wages. Now, if you take American money to Canada, you can live pretty nicely, but the thing is, it's like, you know, working a local job in Canada is not that great. It's pretty, I think the cost of housing is more expensive relative to their incomes. I was told to go to church to find a good wife. That's another place. That's where you can socialize and meet new people. So yeah, it's not wrong, but not something I would recommend, is because, you know, I think like a lot of people are doing that nowadays. And so it's kind of, you know, a lot of people just do that. The churches are very much like cliques. I was telling my wife about that because she was trying to get, you know, into more churches and stuff like that. We were talking about like doing that as an excuse to socialize. Here's a fun fact about churches in the South. But you ever notice that if you go in the South, there's like churches on every corner or whatever, right? Churches are effectively Discord servers. They're Discord servers in the South. They're essentially glorified social clubs where people go out to, you know, chat with one another, you know, before the invention of the internet. So like each one of them is basically a glorified clique with their own in-groups and out-groups, just like every other Discord server, you know, that you'd find on the internet, except, you know, social clubs in real life. Yeah, it depends on the church. Not all churches are the same. I agree. It really depends on the church. My grandma canned preservatives, got spring water from the mountains. Your relationship sounds like an actual partnership, something that boomers on the whole did not demonstrate through their entire marriages. Absolutely, dude. That's honestly, what up, Doc? It's like, that's been my entire relationship with my wife the entire time, is because of the fact that I wanted to marry somebody who, you know, that we could both build off of each other and have a decent life and take care of one another, you know? And so that's the reason why I chose her. It's like, you know, you might find that kind of odd that I was able to talk to like a major red pill or like Undead Chronic and, you know, talk about these things. But, you know, the thing is that like, you know, if you can find yourself a relationship where you can have an overall positive impact on helping one another out, or without like ending up like, you know, what you see on like those red pill videos just being taken advantage of, it's like, go for it, man. But, you know, just be aware of the downsides of, like, you know, how some people behave. It's more or less, you know, instilling a sense of awareness of how things can go wrong to make sure you don't end up in a hole. And so a lot of people kind of missed that and kind of, you know, went too far to the deep end to kind of realize that. So, yeah, no, like, I was very explicit on finding a partner that was compatible and that I could share a good life with, and I found one. So, boomer humor is just her, my wife sucks. Yeah, and you know, the thing is like, I tried telling like a couple of people that it's like, because they grew up in a time where there's a ton of cultural expectations of what people were expected to expect out of one another. It's like, and them not actually living up to it. It's like, you know, why they have such toxic relationships, particularly that generation. And so it sucks that they are kind of products of the environment, but you know, at the end of the day, it's like, are you going to let that define you and what you want to have with your life? If you want a partner, then go for it. And that's kind of what I decided. A brickmaker needs a home to build a home. Christians, particularly Protestants, forgot about the whole don't start a church where one already exists thing. Yeah. I find modern dating and this weird thing to be a weird thing other people talk about. Lol. I just had friends ask me out and ended up dating like 4 to 5 people so far and still friends with them. Yeah, that can happen. You know, sometimes it's just like you find out you're not compatible later down the line. You just kind of move on. It's very common. Only win that. So remember Sarah Stock. I don't remember Sarah Stock. Are unions based in 2026? I think that they're a necessity. I think unions are something that need to have a major comeback because like job markets are just so terrible these days. It's like, you know, you don't really have a choice. Okay, did we get any more leather? Okay, good. We got like 12 leather. Now we can probably build some full set armor. I hate modern dating because of the ghosting. People are so... It's hard to describe. People are so cruel to one another nowadays, especially when it comes to dating. It's like they're just like, you know, one thing that has an issue with like one another and they'll just like immediately disregard one another. And like they're just completely, I guess, out of touch with one another. They just don't care to understand or sympathize or even understand the other party. So... I'm in my early 20s and it honestly feels like I missed out my chance to find a meaningful relationship. The thing is when you're in your early 20s, so basically, Null Butler, like what happened to me when I was in my early 20s, I went into college, I got super busy with the books, I sunk my head in the books, and so I just didn't have time for dating. You know, the thing is in college, it's an interesting one because, you know, sometimes, like, there were a couple of flings in college, but the thing is that, like, you know, because I was just so busy studying, you know, engineering, it's like I just didn't have the time to, like, really get into any relationships, so I was spending most of my time in the library. Since I've never had anybody before. See, that's the tough part, because, like, there can be multifaceted reasons why somebody can't have a partner. You know, sometimes, like, they might go into the incel route, be like, it's because I'm ugly or whatever, right? More often than not, you're just kind of average, and the thing is that it's like you just didn't really have any routes to actually socialize with people, and the biggest thing that's actually going to find you a partner is just socializing with people. Humans are not based in 26. They're the same old catty backstabbing men in 2026, but they're great, you know, but managed poorly. If you can run your own semi-truck, do so. Yeah, I can somewhat agree with that one. Men and women are paranoid of each other. It's simple as this. Yeah, because, like, at the end of the day, it's like they're afraid of getting burnt by one another. And, so they don't want to take any risks. They don't want to accept the fact that maybe, perhaps, like, you're going to get your heart broken on some instances, and some things are not going to go your way. Obviously, like, an unplanned pregnancy is, like, the worst possible thing on the face of the planet, because, you know, especially in this cost of living crisis. I think that's what, like, a fair amount of women, and I could be 100% wrong if there's any women in the chat. I think one of the reasons why, like, dating in the overall is kind of declining for both men and women is because, like, a lot of women, it's like, are also looking at the cost of living crisis. Like, what if I end up accidentally pregnant? And it's like, okay, you're pretty much, it's pretty much over at that point. You're done. I could be wrong because I'm a guy, but, you know. If there's any women in the chat, just let me know if that's, like, what your perspective is. Because I'm more or less talking from a guy's perspective. Let's see if I can get the chest plate. Okay, so I need iron ingots. Cool. Can I build a chest plate now? Sweet. Okay. Or being taken advantage of any kind of way. That's a very big fear. Both sides, actually, really. People don't really hide that. Elon blames unions for making manufacturing too expensive. You know what made American manufacturing? I hate Elon Musk for saying that, Katzer. It's like, oh, unions made American labor expensive. You know what made American labor expensive? The average fucking house price. That's the reason why American labor is so expensive. But they'll never talk about that. They like to pass the cost of work. They want you to pay $3,000 a month in rent, but also at the same time underpay you. Like, that is the world we live in. That's essentially the juxt of why engineering doesn't even pay that great either anymore. So, dating is a job in itself, so there's an opportunity cost complicated by the cost of living. The thing is like we have cultural expectations where men are expected to be the breadwinner, and it's quite literally impossible for them to be the breadwinner. Find me a job that pays better than engineering, and I would love to be proven wrong, because I would love to transition to that field that pays better than mine currently. I can't do abortion. I know that too much. That's totally fair. You know, I get it. It's understandable. Okay, what do I need for this? I just need more leather. It's always the leather, man. I'll tell you. Okay, so I just need more iron for that one. I don't have enough lining scraps. I need to kill more skeletons. So let's go find some skeletons, guys. Want to be a farmer, I'm cooked. You know, farming, not even profitable either, is because the amount of target loans you have to take out just to get a farm. Oh, there's better jobs. It just takes double the student debt. Oh, dude, yeah, dude. Oh, yeah, the better jobs that pay better than being an engineer are basically medicine and law. And they're both of those are postgraduate educations, which take years of actually getting into. So that's, you know, fun. Be a surgeon. You know, you get 200K, but you have like 10 years of medical debt you have to go through. Let's jump this guy, guys. What's up, bitch? Give me your fucking money. Thanks. So, people say dating in America will be like Japan or South Korea are wrong because it always, because people always value real relationships more. Yeah, no, you can find a real relationship. It's just, you got to be open towards it and like open the opportunity. It kind of requires like a lot more socializing. And the thing is because everything's so internet related, it's like, you know, people just don't socialize. Like the third space is already dead. Like the internet is the third space. Like what we're doing right now, talking and chatting with one another, like the internet. Like this has effectively been the replacement for third space for almost a decade at this point. In order to be a surgeon, you really need 10 years. Okay, so let's go through medical school. Because medical school, this is the funny part, is because doctors, by far, actually have the highest earning potential out of the three, you know, law, medicine, and engineering. So, but here's the catch with doctors, you know, is that doctors going to medical school has a significantly higher threshold. Oh, why am I dying exactly? That's weird. So it has a significantly higher threshold just to participate than any of the other stuff. Like, so law, you just go to postgraduate education and you get your, you know, pass the bar or whatever. I've got a buddy who could probably explain that better than me. With engineering, you just need an undergraduate degree, or used to need an undergraduate degree, and you'd be set. And then on top of that, but with medicine, it's like not only do you have to have an undergraduate that's, you know, pre-medical ready, okay? You have to go to graduate school, which is a medical school. Then you have to spend, you know, God knows how many years just basically like you know, practicing, you know, before you actually are a full doctor or whatever, right? You know, and then like maybe after like 10 or 15 years of like, you know, education, can you finally become a doctor? You know, so it's a pretty long road. And so like the pay is definitely really good. It's up there. But you're going to be spending, like, you're going to be working your ass off till you're like 35, assuming you started at 18 right out of high school. So it's like, you know, so it's a huge trade-off. It's something that you really got to get into. 4-year undergrad, 4-year medical school, 4-year residency. Average, exactly. Metal mechanic, you just said it all. Residency is a next step after that. I couldn't remember what it was because I'm not a doctor myself, right? So the thing is yes, you make a ton of money as a surgeon or a doctor, but the amount of ROI or the amount of investment you have to put is so tremendous, it's not even funny. Sometimes it's just not even feasible. And honestly, it's like, it's also incredibly competitive. It's like they have very high standards. Think about it this way. It's like you wouldn't want the person doing open heart surgery to be an idiot, would you? You'd want them to be like competent. So you're kind of stuck on that. You'd want somebody to be competent at their job. So, you know, that's why it's so restrictive. It takes a good... Yeah. Now we're going to go find a Badlands. This is going to be where the fun begins. 3 to 7 years for residency, depending on specialty. 3 for family medicine, and 7 years for neurosurgery. Yet Cuba has a lot of doctors. Yeah, Cuba has a lot of doctors because the fact is a lot of it is kind of, you know, subsidized to a large degree, so it doesn't require... So the thing is, the difference between, like, a socialist state like Cuba and, like, what we have here is that, you know, in more socialist states is that a lot of the times these things are free. If you can't, the training and education is free. But in the capitalist states like the United States, like, you have an heavy front investment just to participate in the first place, to actually participate. So, like, most people who are working class are just never going to be able to afford it. So, you know, that's the big upfront cost there. So the upfront cost is the reason why it's more scarce in the United States. And it's more money-based. Facts, it takes a good chance. Yeah, true. Someone who forged their credentials because they are cheaper than all the other docs. Because Cubans aren't that great. Socialism is the way to go. Yeah, at this point, like, what else do we got? We're all getting poor, and, like, you know, on top of that, like, the wealthy have essentially ripped every social democratic, you know, compromise under the sun, you know, from underneath us, and so here we are. I'm gonna go down there, and I'm gonna try and go down there where I don't get destroyed by that pool of lava. I need some iron. I need to get some more. Hopefully. Well, the great thing is I'm not gonna die as much as because now... There you go. Get some more iron. There's some right there. Enjoy this while you can, because one day Alistair is going to be a massive figure and we will send super chats like, to him while he insults us like Nick. I'm flattered that you think that highly of me. It's like, but the thing is, I'm just a regular guy giving his 2 cents on the internet. The funny part is that, like, I still take more pride in being an engineer, even if it's being hollowed out, than I do as a content creator. I've said it multiple times. It's like, my passion's always, my dreams have always been engineering and technology, but the thing is, that's been hollowed away, and that's just, like, not really going anywhere. You know, it's not even a respected field anymore. Send super chats to him while he insults us like Nick. That's funny. Maybe. Maybe if it's funny. I'll insult some people, but more often than not, I end up insulting myself in my own chat. Like, when I do something stupid, like the stream isn't working or my microphone isn't working, be like, wow, I'm retarded. So... They already socialized the losses and privatized the gains. I hope the politicians know they can only do so many times before the investor heads start rolling. Yeah, you know, it's like with AI, it's like one big fat FOMO. You know, one big fat fear of missing out. They all jump the gun. You all know it's offshoring. Like, it's all going to kind of retract in a sort of way, but I don't think it's ever going to really fully come back because they're fully invested into India, man. You know, they're fully okay with, you know, offshoring everything to India. They literally just hate American workers. Here's the thing about the U.S. healthcare system. It's not even a free market system. No, there's no real competition in it, and that's the biggest lie that I hate the most, because it's like the HR department in the United States. It's literally just one big fat gaslight. Oh boy, all these enemies spawn. Crazy. Oh, you asshole. You throwing bombs at me? Fuck you. Oh, they're all throwing bombs at me. You guys are totally destroying me. Fuck. Yeah, these guys almost like turbo nuke me. But yeah, it's one big giant gaslight over the cost of living. And so, or not cost of living, it's just one big gaslight about the free market systems. Because the thing is, if you notice the gaslights, it always goes along the lines like, we're going to say we're going to do something, they do the exact opposite, and then they project like whatever straw man and propaganda on another country. You know, that's all they ever do. They claim to be one thing, never actually do it. That's one of the reasons why I stopped being a right-wing libertarian, is because I just got tired of the hypocrisy of just how much they rigged the fucking system. Alistair getting the Tsar treatment. Make sure you get them all. Yeah, you know what? Honestly, yeah, give them the Tsar treatment. Absolutely. Thanks to how they avoid taxes via loans using bank money. That's how they avoid taxes in general, is because, you know, technically it's not a taxable income because they're just taking a loan. So they'll just take a loan against some of their assets. I got in a huge fight with the recruiter over don't badmouth your previous employer. No, you're right. You know, I'd rather just be all hush-hush. Got in a huge fight with the recruiter. The thing is, at one point or another, like, you know, as much as we talk about not bad-mouthing your previous employer and stuff like that, it's like, the reason why everything sucks so much, the reason why the cost of living is so terrible, is because we don't badmouth our employers enough. Like, the thing is we need to collectively come along and realize, okay, you know what? We need to start sharing experiences, talk about what's going on with our stuff, and say, you know what? This is too much. We can't do this. It's consistently shown that our standard of living has gotten worse and worse is because we have not badmouthed our employers. So, you know, look where we are because we didn't badmouth our employers, because we're afraid of basically, you know, looking bad to our employers out loud. When is it going to be when our employers are afraid of looking bad to us, ordinary people? That's the world I'm looking forward to. I get the sentiment is because, you know, a lot of people, it's like, you know, they're afraid of speaking out against a raw deal. They're like, oh my God, what if they use this against me or whatever, right? But the thing is, the more they're using your silence against you when you don't speak out against them is because then they're free to form up their own little stupid narrative that's all lies and gaslights because of your silence. And so, like, I get the fear, but at the end of the day, it's like the reason we're in this situation is because people didn't stand up and speak out. They love to talk about accountability, but we need to talk about accountability for our employers now because they love talking about accountability with us. I got listed from Robert because I complained about doing a job interview where they knew where the position was already filled. I wasted 2 hours in the job and they told me I had to. My former employer is dead. They'd be in a very hot place right now. That bad, huh? Libertarians are hypocrites by design. You know, I really hate saying that is because I used to consider myself a right-wing libertarian, but I've just consistently been made an asshole by believing that every single time because of their hypocrisy of the ruling class. Speaking about being afraid to speak out, it's been rumored for nearly a decade that more companies will just put you on a hiring blacklist if you talk out against them. You know what? Yeah, that's absolutely true. But, you know, the thing is, they're trying to use that as an individual tactic to shut people down from talking about them at all. And the thing about it is, their entire thing relies on the democratic gaslight that I've talked so much about on this channel. The idea that we're all standing alone, right? You know, when they call us entitled, when they tell us that we're not team players, that we're not part of the family, it's because the fact is we refuse to follow through their terms and conditions that these people set up for us. And therefore, we're not a part of their supposed fictitious majority, okay? We all are sharing the same experience. We are the majority. They're not the majority, we are. And so the reason they like to individualize us is because the fact is that's how they have power over us, is when we are individuals, they can't shut us down one piece at a time. So, you know, that's what I say. It's like, yeah, they have the blacklist thing, but you know, at the end of the day, it's like, you know, you have to stand up at one point or another, or you end up getting the rulers that you deserve. That's what everybody needs to recognize at the end of the day. Yes, it's terrifying. I mean, I told about it earlier. It's like, yeah, it fucking terrifies me. But who else is going to speak out against it? Otherwise, you know, lest hold your silence. They need you to suffer in silence so they can continue on with their tyranny. Libertarians are contrarians and don't want to accept the fact that a strong federal government is necessary to ensure their rights are protected. They think they'll beat armies with some beans and AR-15s. Yeah, that's a romanticized notion, is because the fact is all the infrastructure to basically go after dissident groups is already there, and libertarians pretend that their individual gun ownership is really a threat to the state. It's really not. So, the phrase team player just makes me apathetic hearing it so many times. It's funny is that they talk about that's the democratic gaslight, because you're not a part of the majority according to them. And that's what I mean by the democratic gaslight, the fictitious majorities. Like, you're just not a team player. You're not following by the rules of the group that I just made up in the top of my head. And so therefore you're a bad, morally reprehensible person. I doubt any kind of class revolution will happen since Americans are too divided and too comfortable. Too comfortable? I don't think too comfortable. We're obviously not comfortable. Too complacent. I could agree with you on that one. They're not comfortable. They're complacent. Politics is WWD for, you know, adults. It's not like wrestling. Yeah, it's funny watching partisan politics. It is essentially just that for, you know, Disney adults. There is none to the libertarian. We'll just don't have people who go full crazy for the government at the moment. Democrats are like the HR. Yeah, they kind of are. You complain to them, but they're not going to do anything, and they'll just use it against you. That's essentially all it is. And that's kind of the funny part. I dealt with, like, HR today. It's like I brought up all these serious grievances. I created a paper trail on them for 6 months, saying that this is becoming a logistical infeasibility. And I think it's just they're trying to push me out of the job. That's essentially what they're trying to do. Is because they know that it was a logistical infeasibility. They just want to basically push me out of the job. You know, that's fine. This company fucking sucks. I'm gonna go my own way. That's the way I see it. You know, if I can get another job, I will. But, you know, that takes time finding jobs. So, it's gonna be a fun set of Wage Rage radios coming up, you know, with that in mind. Imagine being Gen Z high school, fresh to graduate, having to deal with this. What do you think? Oh, dude, you're toast. If you're Gen Z and you're straight out of high school, it's like, you know, I'm a late millennial. And honestly, it's like, it's already bad enough, you know, being a late millennial, watching the ladder get pulled for me and my wife. So, like, It's gonna get worse. And like, at least we're in this together, you know. So is what it is. I don't want to give any false impressions. I wish I could give you positive inspiration on that regard, but it's gonna get worse. Sneaky little military knowledge. Ballistic vests aren't level 4. A 30 out of 06. Grandpa's old deer rifle can defeat any infantryman's armor. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah. Obviously, for self-defense reasons, I can understand where you're coming from. Americans are lazy creatures. They'd rather wade through sewage than climb out of the river, than walk 2 feet to find the shower. That's the problem. It's like a lot of Americans are just basically giant-ass can-dos. I can't do nothing, bro. I can't do nothing. You know, I'm just gonna have to cope about it. And, you know, so it's like, the thing is that, like, I wouldn't say it's, you know, it's comfort. It's just the fact is it's fear. And I can understand the fear. Alistair is Manifesto Core. I already made a manifesto like a year and a half ago, the Technocratic Syndicalist Manifesto that somehow keeps getting shared around on Substack, and I'm just kind of like, I wrote this like a year and a half ago, and I kind of walked away from like the mainstream left. It's like they're just infuriating how stupid they are. But yeah, lazy. I don't think it's lazy or an enfranchisement, because enfranchised people, you know, don't complain about things. I think it's just the fact that people are afraid, understandably so. What about college, guys? They say, let's say 2024, 2026. I still have friends who went into business, computer engineering, whatever, and still struggling to find a job. The places demand 3 to 5 years worth of experience. See, the interesting thing is like, I don't know if that's because those jobs demanded experience. Is because back when I got out of college, and that was well before 2024, you know, the same jobs would still literally demand 3 to 5 years experience. You know, the secret is I still applied to them and still ended up getting jobs to them. You know, honestly, now that I'm going to be looking for jobs again, it's like, you know, we're going to find out how that works out, even though I have like several, you know, years of experience at this point. So it's hard to tell. It's like, I don't know if that's always been the case or whether or not that's just like unique, because like companies have always done this shit. It's like, you need experience to have a job, an entry-level position. And the thing is, if it's listed as an entry-level position, what I do is like, okay, you listed as an entry-level position. I don't care if I have no experience when I fresh got out of college. I applied to it anyways, you know? So the thing is, many of us are not doing anything because we don't know how to do it. That's the big one. That's actually the big one, space builders, because most people don't know how to do it, and that's okay, right? You know, that's understandable. Is because when it comes to building a political revolution, obviously not to necessarily get too fed posted talking about revolution in the chat, is that like most people don't act is because they just don't know what to do. And that's why I say for any successful political movement, you have to have an idea of what you're doing, a well-defined goal for what you can rally your base around. Otherwise, you'll just essentially frustrate your base into leaving. You know, watch it every time with any political group. It's like they'll basically have a base, they'll tap into discontentment, but they don't know how to channelize the rage to actually get anything done. And so what happens is their base gets burnt out, they start turning against each other, they start lashing against each other, and then they feel like nothing is getting accomplished, and so they hop from one group to another. I call it action cellism. You know, leftist groups are almost infamous with that. Is basically where they're busy jumping from one group to another because they just don't know what to do. They don't have well-defined, like, targetable goals. And so what happens is people get burnt out, they lash out against each other, and they just eventually leave. Happens every time. And the thing is sometimes that requires discipline. Also, the ruling class does know that. That's why they focus on doomer as propaganda, is to just burn you guys out. So, you know, that's why I'm so anti-doomerism, is because a lot of it is just propaganda to keep people, you know, defeatist. Because if people are defeatists, you know, they're just gonna be like, well, you know, the rich pedophiles is one. I can't do nothing, you know, bro. It's over. You know, you can't do nothing. You might as well just sacrifice your firstborn child to, like, Moloch or something. You know, they require doomerism so people get frustrated and leave. And I've seen people do this. Sometimes they'll do it as a bait question to get, like, people to Fed post or whatever. And, you know, that's the extent of it. The opposite of doom posting is Fed posting. Fun fact. You know, that I want, if any quote I want to be remembered for, it's that one. The opposite of doom posting is Fed posting. That's the truth. And they know that. You really need a group to do anything, whether it be starting a business or... I think it's better just to kind of recognize starting a community. That's the more important thing. Starting a group, community, and that's probably the best way to start it off. Because the fact is, it's more honest, you can have a discussion, and then set realistic expectations with that community on what you can and can't do. Is because at the end of the day, like, we're just 90 jackasses on the internet talking it out, so... Let me get some more of these, like, fruit things so I can, like, get my health back. So, the Badlands is a place we're gonna have to go to basically get other types of wars. Most people don't have any experience with unions, political organizers, really think voting is. We're gonna get educated soon through the economic continuous supply. Yeah, we're gonna have to learn it the hard way. I'm gonna be honest, neither do I. I don't have any experience on that one. So the thing is, we're all going to be learning that together. What up, Doc? Is, you know, how to actually get those things organized, because, you know, we don't really have a choice. We're all getting poorer day by day. The cost of living is getting worse. What other choice do we have? So we might as well figure it out ourselves. That's the way I look at it. Alistair, I think you know now my stance, but I continue to believe that even after the Rev in question, what replaces the equally oppressive or worse? That there's always going to be a risk of that. Fun fact. You know, you're always going to have that slight possibility where things could go worse than like what you started out with. But that's also, again, like, you know, it's like, that's why it's good to discuss ideas. That's why leftists talk so much about theories, because the fact is you need to be able to talk about what comes after to actually have a discussion on what needs to come after in the first place, you know, because you could just end up with like just a bunch of bloodshed and the old order gets restored, and so nothing better actually comes back. I try to talk about both. I try to tap into the discontentment on my channel and also talk about substantive solutions to the problems that I'm talking about, or at least try to. Nobody's perfect at the end of the day, because at the end of the day, you know, I'm just one guy, you know, giving his opinion on the internet. That's why the reformers failed in Russia. They tried telling the farmers about theory. Lenin knew the power rested in the urban centers and listened to the people. No, Lenin was 100% right. And the funny part is like, Leninism, funny enough, Reaper, is probably more relevant to the modern United States than like Maoism is. Because, you know, most of the power, most of the discontentment and the disenfranchisement, because the wealthy have fled to the countryside to basically LARP as country bros, right? Most of the disaffected and discontented masses are in the urban centers, the urban proletariat. You know, that's why they're doing the 15-minute cities. You know, these are the people that are the most disenfranchised, because the fact that they're participating in a system that they're perpetuating to keep the people in the countryside like pretty happy. Not all of them, because there's rural poverty, but the thing is, the wealthy are now fleeing to the countryside to you know, basically LARP like their country on Twitter. The group who's more ready for a civil war are people when they're campaigning when they were young. But yeah, young people do disproportionately well in a civil war. I see the same thing about American intervention, you know, years ago. The government seems to be all too eager about the foreign lands to topple dictators. Yet they somehow do. I think they're trying to deal with Iran. They couldn't topple Iran, and so we're dealing with the consequences of a dying American empire. They don't have a game plan for occupation. No, they don't. They don't even have a game plan for Iran, and that's, you know, how we're in this situation. But that being said, I think I'm going to go ahead and cut off the stream. I'm going to probably continue on tomorrow and probably find those Badlands so we can get those special ores. But it's been a fun stream. I hope you guys enjoyed. So I hope to see you in future streams. I've been putting out more videos lately. I've also been doing streaming. I'm trying to give you guys like a consistent, you know, content output, is because, you know, at the point, it's like if I end up losing my job, it's like, you know, I guess I'll just do more content creation because I'll have more free time to actually do stuff. So, you know, it seems like, you know, the recent content's doing pretty well, so I'll continue putting out, you know, videos, and I'll continue streaming, and I'll continue, you know, making shorts because I think they're funny. But it's been a fun time. I've enjoyed your time, so I guess we'll see you in the future.